we, the jury, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
Princess Diana dead.
Oh, she died. Where's the remote?
Mickey Smalls was also embroiled in a rivalry between East and West Coast rappers. His competition, Tupac Shakur.
Astronauts getting involved. This is reported. Oh, this is outrageous.
I haven't got AIDS. I'm HIV positive.
Hello, and welcome to Time. I'm JP.
I'm Matty.
And I'm Liam.
And it's a sweaty edition of Time this month.
Oh.
I like this is
JP, we haven't just got off the sauna or the gym here. It's about 40 degrees outside. We're playing tribute to Peter Sinertia, who probably made his debut around this time, did he, in wrestling? But bloody hell, lads, it's hot.
Oh.
Fucking hell.
I mean, for video viewers, you're lucky that I'm not doing this topless, frankly, at this stage, because it is hotter than the fucking sun at this point as well. And I put out amber alerts, and it's just typical Brits. Can't cope with the weather at all. But lads, are we all well? Are we all ready for
All
this
good.
month's edition of Time? June 1990 is where we find ourselves. And so the first question we have to go to, and I'll go to you first, Liam. Where were you in June of 1990?
Wow, 4 years old. So my memory about the time is not very vivid. Let's say.
That's poor.
Yeah. I will get to something very shortly regarding one of my lasting memories of this period of my life that happened in June 1990. But for the most part, yeah, probably yet to eat solid food. Probably still having my nappy changed, probably still going to bed at 9 o'clock, which I am very jealous of in this day and age. But yeah, very young, and nice to do an edition of Time where we go back a little bit further and we can lean on the what do we say, Matty? The older members of the panel,
The old brigade. That's what we say. That's what we say. But he's flying solo tonight, JP. So I won't be as harsh this episode, mate. I won't be as harsh.
Exactly. This is you forgot to mention Liam though, even though you were 4 years old, you still had a DJ set going on in Aston. So
Yep,
you were still doing that on the side. Matty, how about you, mate?
Yeah, pretty much the same as Liam. This is my birthday month, so I would have hit 4 years of age at this time. But yeah, as Liam said there, this is the first time we're going. This is the oldest we've gone back, isn't it? And I'd say it's like obviously the first time I'm reviewing this type of stuff. I know we watch it all back, but actually with an older head, because I didn't have zero memories, JP, of this time at all. So it's going to be interesting in that regard, this episode. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Okay, well, as unfortunately the elder statesman of the three, I haven't got Gareth here as the backup this week. It's just the three of us this time round. I was going to.
I'm sorry, can I just say, JP, Gareth forgot he was on. I'm scared about his memory, mate. So he forgot he's gone, so we leave him.
Well, it happens to us.
Yeah,
But, of that particular vintage, you can't remember stuff in here. I can remember this time pretty well, sadly, because I just finished primary. I was just in the midst of finishing primary school and about to go to secondary school. So, like,
outrageous, JP.
yeah, exactly. So there isn't any sort of me on the piss in June of 1990 stories.
Are you sure?
I was watching plenty of telly. Well, you can take the boy out of London, can't you? But yeah, it was. These were like very much informative times as we were kicking the 80s out of existence. Thank Christ. If you lived in the UK in the 80s, it was never a fun place to be around. And getting right into the brave new world of the 1990s. So
see, that's a thing, JP. Like that, or from that regard, like obviously you were still young yourself, mate. You know, once you was young yourself, but it's like I'm fascinated.
I still had kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinated with the 80s, though, like you're saying there. Obviously, in this, but it's me again. It's American stuff with me. But the 80s is just the most fondly remembered decade, Liam. I don't know if you're the same, mate. I don't think we've had this conversation, even when we've been talking in real life, mate. But like the 80s to me, just the movies. I know they're not regarded. I think I've mentioned on this show before. And sorry, even going off on one here already. But like it's not regarded really as a great decade for proper movies, is it, Liam? Tarantino doesn't really rate it as well. So, but it's always just the big blockbusters. It just reminds me of, and like the music, the big stars like your Prince, Madonna, Jackson, and all that. So it's just that decade that jumps out to me. And you know, hopefully after this, which is obviously 1990, the turn, we can go back even further, JP, to when you were our age. We could do stuff for the 80s. But that's on the list coming up, mate.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely. This, as you say, this period is very, from my short memory of this era, is very Americanized. In that, a lot of my thoughts, a lot of my images that I relate with the period are all very Americanized or based around American sources of entertainment, American fashions, anything around that time. And a lot of it did really shape me when I was younger in terms of what I lent towards, which was popular at the time. And I think as we move through the 90s, as we've done on previous episodes as well, that becomes less and less. You know, we have the advent of like Britpop and, you know, Cool Britannia going up to the 2000s, that influence within the UK particularly is a little bit less and less. But this time here on this episode of Time that we're doing is very Americanized in terms of what I remember.
And like you just said there, Liam, we can go back in our archives now, JP. We must be coming up to 10 or so episodes of this show now to go back through the years to see how things change and our tastes change. And it's brilliant stuff in it. Love it.
I think there's several points, the conversations and the things we're going to cover on this, where the things that you guys have said about the Americanization of culture, where that kind of comes in and how that becomes a bit more prevalent. There's some really like kind of clear cut examples of how it made its way into the UK as well. But Matty, explain to those who've never listened to Time before, what is the structure? How do we go about doing this?
Well, we cover the 4 pillars of life, don't we, guys, on this show? We cover television, sports, music, and film. Books and games still haven't made quite made the cut yet, Liam. You know what I mean? I don't know if you're pushing for them to never crack it. Yeah, well, Liam. Well, JP, you're not a book man, are you? You know what I mean?
Not really at the minute, no.
Yeah,
no.
So we're all right then. We'll always have these as the 4 pillars. It shapes us when we're kids, and you know, with them that still enjoy the 4 pillars of life, as everyone should. So we'll dive into, you know, what's happening in them 4 pillars in June of 1990. And with what you're saying, JP, and what we've all said about the Americanization, I mean, Liam, if you're going to start us off today with TV, is this the biggest American influence yet that you're going to talk about first?
Yeah, absolutely. So start with TV. A broad subject matter throughout the 1990s, coming out of the back of the 80s and throughout the 90s into the 2000s. The competition between satellite TV providers Sky Television and British Satellite Broadcasting continues on after BSB launches on cable in March 1990. 13 months after Sky, both companies experience heavy losses throughout the year, which ultimately leads to a 50-50 merger between the two companies in November to form B Sky B. All existing BSB subscribers are sent Sky equipment free of charge to access their satellites, and over time, most of BSB's channels are scrapped in favour of Sky's counterparts. Now, I don't think we can underestimate the influence this had on culture, on television, on everything. My family were were an early convert to Sky Television. We got Sky Television earlier in this year in 1990. I believe we got it it may have been January 1990. And I remember at the time, one of the few memories I have of this time was that there were 3 events that Sky were broadcasting that between my father and my brother went with Sky over BSB at the moment. And that was, they had coverage of England's tour of the West Indies in cricket. They had the first first Mike Tyson fight that wasn't broadcast live on terrestrial TV, which was his fight in Tokyo with Buster Douglas. And for my brother at the time as well, in March, he asked for Sky over BSB on the strength of WrestleMania 6 being shown on the Sky channel. So that was, very early had Sky, few and far between in terms of memories of Sky, but BSB was very prevalent as well. A lot of people remember BSB from the square aerials that they would have over Sky Television's more more generic satellites that they would have on the side of the houses, which haven't really evolved much from what you would assume has been a standard satellite dish. Remember at the time, BSB had a lot of swell with middle class people and the upper class people, as the dish on the side of the house that they were providing was not as ugly as the Sky version at the time. So that was one of their first routes into homes that Sky didn't have. But generally, over this whole period of the early 90s and Sky becoming more and more of a powerhouse, I think some of the early television programs that Sky adopted from the USA, WWF being a big one of them at the time as well, and probably equal to that was The Simpsons. And
massive.
You think of the staying power of Simpsons in British culture. To this day, it is recognisable. It has never really waned in terms of coverage in this country. There's always a channel at some time, be it on Sky or terrestrial, that is showing an episode of The Simpsons. Sky really did hit the nail on the head with their programming early in terms of what they brought into the country and basically how it evolved. I know a little bit later on in the 90s, we moved towards the advent of the Premiership, which was massive for football, and it was spearheaded by Sky. In rugby league, if Gareth was here, he would mention the Super League, the advent of Super League as well, becoming a commodity that was a televised commodity that Sky Sports got behind a lot more when it launched to what it is now. But that was a massive coup for Sky at the time. And going back to previous episodes as well, boxing was a big thing for Sky. Boxing being a big thing at the time in terms of a pay-per-view market. Hard to believe for some people, but Sky didn't really have a dedicated sports channel at this period in time. When it merged with BSB, it had Eurosports, which was a little bit more diverse than what Eurosports become in the modern age. But a lot of their premium sports showings, be it WWF pay-per-views or big boxing fights, was on the movie channel.
Remember that?
Sorry, it was on Sky Movies.
Sky Movies Plus in the end, wasn't it, Liam?
Yeah, Sky Movies Plus, because that was the only subscription channel at the time Sky provided. So to see these events behind a paywall, they were broadcast on Sky. But yeah, I'll send it over to you two in terms of your memories at this period, in terms of Sky, the excitement. I mean, JP, you mentioned about school and that, the excitement of Sky coming in and having more than the usual 4 channels at this point. It was having these additional channels that you could add and channels that were broadcasting stuff that was cool, which was popular and which a lot of people really wanted to see at the time.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, this was where we had you speaking at the beginning of when you're speaking, you mentioned about US culture and how it became so much part of the national conversation. Sky was the biggest route into that. Don't get me wrong, there were American programs that were on your terrestrial TV networks, but there was only a finite amount of space for them to fit into it. So it was a massive deal for me. Now, we weren't early adopters to Sky. To get my mum to get CFAX, I'm sure I've said this story many, many times. Like, there was one day came out, she goes, "Well, I've done it." And I was like, "Oh," and I thought Sky is coming in. She went, "Got teletext." And you can't imagine don't get me wrong, a lot of love for 302, 320, 340, Liam. You remember?
Yeah.
360, 370, like, you know, all of those, but like it wasn't the same thing. So it was which friends had Sky, and it was primarily for being able to watch wrestling, because that was like the sport that it had. Because this is, you've got to just put it into the context of the time. There is no Premier League. I mean, I'll speak about this in a little bit. So I always got the impression, though, it was the Premier League that kind of like almost saved Sky. That it was that the Premier League was the thing that got people, because football coverage on TV was lackluster at best. It was very few like league games.
That's remarkable, though. Sorry, JP, to cut you off. To think now, like literally what, 35 years ago, like genuinely, because when I was watching, sorry to jump in, JP, again, mate.
No, go for it.
Like, you know, when you put them videos in, Liam, the little trailers, and I went down a rabbit hole then and watched even more. It's like, I always remember the Charity Shield being a big thing on Sky. You know what I mean? Like, once again, you probably that was seen as a big game. Now it's just a throwaway. No one's bothered about that. No. But they were presenting that as like a big game. You must see, stay in and watch this game. But I'd say, was it on like it was the big match on ITV at this point?
Yeah,
you were getting Division 1 football, so it's wild. Like as you say, pre-Premier League. It's and you've lived it though, mate. You can remember it. It's
exactly.
Wild to me.
It was primarily being able to watch, and the first big like wrestling event that I'd watched live on Sky was WrestleMania 7. So that was 91, and it was around. I'll mention his name later on as well. Paolo Manzi's house, and it was and he had it. So it was like round there, and it was incredible to me. But there was always, to go back onto the sort of the BSB Sky B stuff. Square Eels was the sort of colloquialism, and there was a whole big thing about people being terrified that house prices would go down. That fear has never gone away amongst a certain generation in this country, but house prices would go down if they saw these ugly satellite dishes on the side. Loads of people would refuse to have them because it's like somehow it was seen as being quite common still, which there was a real element of snobbery to it as much as anything else. And it would be used later on, actually, having Sky as this way of going, well, if you've got money for Sky, you should have money for X, Y, and Z in that case. And it was like,
I was about to say that.
If you can't go out, like, then you need access, then you're going to be staying indoors. Then in some ways, having Sky in there as a result, and particularly when they had the football, became actually like the cost-effective measure. When I was at university, we had cable in. And the reason we had that was it was like, look, we're going to want to watch loads of football. We just can't afford practically to go to the pub each and every time to do that. I'm just get it in the house, and then we don't need to worry about it. Like, so yeah, these are like, it was a massive, massive deal just being able to have access to this stuff. And for me, it was the films, because again, we were in that period of the delay from films being out in the States to being like coming out in the cinemas over here. And then the enormous delay to them coming out in video. And you had something like Sky Movies to be able to kind of like fill those gaps and just sort of show those bits live. And The Simpsons, like I say, that was very much like the Trojan horse to kind of get people in.
Yeah, well, see, my memories of Sky never ever had it until, like, you know, Sky Digital, like 2003. I was always, my dad, I think I've mentioned on this, like with Telewest and cable. That was the first like access I had, but a very hazy memory, and I haven't told this story on here before. Very, very hazy. You might be able to fill me in. You guys will know more. This was about maybe a year or so later, maybe 1991, maybe into 92 even. And I remember like my mum's mate was babysitting me, and we had obviously the aerial in the wall, like the hole to put your aerial, and he brought something round from his. So I was about obviously 5 or 6. He was about like 16 or whatever, you know what I mean? And he brought this like apparatus round, and he connected it to the aerial. And I remember watching primetime wrestling, and I don't know what he done. It wasn't the clearest picture in the world, but I just remember it being, I don't know what it was he had. I don't even know, Liam. I don't even you know what it is. But I was just so made up. And then he never babysat me again. And I was gutted because I was like, I'll watch this primetime wrestling, you know, where the kids loving it. It was just so wild. And I'd love to like time travel back and see what it actually was and what device and what the hell he was up to. Fucking just a wild memory there, like. But yeah, never Sky for us, like. But and down me rabbit hole, Liam, I was watching I think it's a documentary the BBC or Channel 4 made in 1995, which felt like, once again, to name this show, like which felt like 50 years later, genuinely, and it's only 5. And it opens up with this guy, Liam, and he's got this satellite dish, and it's as big as his house, seriously, in his back garden. And he's getting stuff from all around the world, like Indian TV in the end, Italian. So it just escalated even more. So I'm going to watch that in full just to see how thing. But it was just the biggest thing ever to happen, as you say, to TV over here. 100% was
on a similar point of what you're mentioning. I remember, it must have been 96 or 97. I think it was either a Tyson fight after he come out of prison, or it was a Frank Bruno fight. And as you were saying, back in those days, depending on what Sky box you had, you could still see pixelated images.
Yeah,
which were pixelated channels, but the movement of the images caused the pixels behind it to move as well, so you could vaguely make out the motion of characters and stuff. And I remember going around somebody's house and watching, say it was a Bruno fight, and him having that as a scrambled screen on his TV with the volume turned down, but the radio commentary turned up.
Oh, brilliant.
So it synced with the images, sort of thing. And yeah, I always remember that. And what you were saying in terms of bigger aerials as well, I remember people having aerials, and if you turn your dish in one direction, you pick up this.
Yeah.
If you go the other direction, you pick up other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think it was satellite times as well that would print the frequencies of the channels that were in Europe. So if you pointed it generally in a direction, you could possibly pick up like an RTL or something like that. But
ProSieben.
yeah, DSF for like pay-per-views and stuff that we wouldn't get. But yeah, generally with Sky at the time, as you were saying, I think it cannot be understated how much of a foothold it had in shaping what culture was. You know, you think we mentioned Simpsons, WWF. I remember Sky One with its launch, the 21 Jump Street. Cops seemed like seemed like the biggest show in the world at that point, because it was like prime time on Sky, stuff like that.
Reality,
yeah,
you know,
and then moving over to the sports that they were showing as well. You know, like you guys were saying in terms of football coverage at the time, there was not that live rolling coverage of football matches on a weekend. You're waiting for match of the day. That was pretty much it in terms of seeing football. And just going back to that Americanization we mentioned in terms of culture at the time, you look at some of those Division 1 games before the advent of the Premiership around this point, and you look at sport in, you know, something as trivial as you watch an episode of World of Sport Wrestling from that time and compare it to what WWF looked like. You look at some of those. You look at some of one of those Division 1 football games, and they were drab. You know, there was the rise of hooliganism at the time as well.
Yeah.
So families didn't want to go to football games. Pitches were awful. You look at some highlight videos, and the pitches were turning up. And then you look, as I said, you look at something like the NFL at the time, and people always romanticize about the late 80s and the NFL on Channel 4 and on Sky and the NBA at that point, and saying, I never understood why it became so popular in the UK. But you compare, you know, one was bright lights, glamour, you know, these stars, larger than life characters, and while the other ones were like, yeah, we're just a bit, you know, we're a bit muck and brass, you know, we're proper, you know, we play sports in a proper way. This isn't entertainment, this is sport. Whereas the sport that was coming into the UK from America and that understood the show aspect of things. So you can understand why people gravitated towards these things at the time. You know, it's easy to see. But do you guys have anything else regarding Sky? Do you feel Sky's influence in the wider society is kind of lost itself in more recent times with just the sheer number of channels and the sheer number of avenues where things can be viewed, you know, your YouTubes and stuff?
To be fair to them though, JP, sorry, to be fair to them, the fact they're still around though, like in this day and like, genuinely, like that might seem like a bit of a strange thing to say, but they're still trying to compete, probably still are competing though. I haven't got Sky Q, you know, I got rid of my Sky subscription a couple of years back now, but yeah, that they're still around and trying to have a go, JP, you must speak volumes to them, like, must have.
They are, I mean, it's still a product that fundamentally what sports they have is the access to it. And for a long time, they were such a dominant market leader, primarily because of Premier League. But then when they were able to broaden it out, particularly into cricket, like when after the Ashes in 2005, and they were like dominant parts of the culture. And you'd always hear, you know, there would always be the argument, people like bemoaning the fact that Sky had the rights, it wasn't going to be on free to air, so therefore were those sports going to end up dying? But then they were in this sort of Faustian pact where they needed the money from Sky in order to survive. So they kind of had to make do with it. Now, in some ways, I don't actually think that's necessarily Sky's fault. I always have probably been a bit more kinder to Sky than I would do other Rupert Murdoch organs, simply because Sky News, outside of Richard Littlejohn or whoever would have a show, it wasn't Fox News. it was still very much like kind of like straight laced presenting pretty much across the board. So it was kind of generally inoffensive. I just think now, because sports rights and they are our competitors, they've had and Sky's own financial problems, they've had to sell off stuff. So therefore, when it comes,
they'd be lost without the Premier League. Like they'd be gone.
They'd
be
gone.
Yeah,
they'd be
that's
gone.
why that they'll always have that though, won't they?
Yeah. And I was going to mention that probably the biggest transition you probably see with Sky from this point in time and this early part of the 90s, taking sport away from what Sky offer, is that, as JP alluded to, having movies that had just come out of the video shop or not long left the cinema to be able to be viewed on your television was a massive thing at the time. Whereas now, in the advent of streaming and Netflix and like, I don't know anyone who has Sky movies anymore, because what is available on there is so readily available elsewhere in terms of other streaming services. So I think their foothold in terms of movies and films is very much lost. But I also think that their strength with sport is what keeps Sky ticking. And as you say, if they were to lose the football, and probably to a lesser extent, stuff like the darts and F1, you know, they have that, I wouldn't say it's a niche, but they have a product and products that people are always going to willing to be paying Sky for. I think there's a bit of brand equity with Sky over the years. You hear people say, you know, oh, I have Sky Sports to watch the football, but I don't have BT Sports. I don't have TNT Sport. I don't have Setanta. Sky is always that first point of call, that its brand has always... It's always been the benchmark in terms of like sports coverage in this country from when it started to being that if you want to watch the biggest sports with the best coverage, even in some instances that may not necessarily be true, Sky is always perceived as that's where I'm going to pay for a subscription. Yeah.
And if it wasn't for Sky, you don't really get the split in darts, which darts needed in order for it to reach the next level, which, you know, as all big wrestling fans, like darts has become effectively the new wrestling, and just the way that it's kind of promoted itself. And that's something Sky kind of built from the ground up. That was very much, you know, they were in a pub in the Circus Tavern in Purfleet when they'd had the whole split and stuff like this. But then they've always had the pick of the best games when it's come to football. They've always, seemingly to me, they've always had enough dedication towards the NFL. Like, just in terms of how it's even presented, and in terms of even the pundits and the presenters and the knowledge base and things like that, they've always gone that bit further than, say, when it would go into a Channel 4 or a Channel 5, who it felt like quite often a lot of these other broadcasters are trying to fit in square pegs into round holes and go, we got this presenter on tap, they can host this. And it's like, actually, no. Sky would always sort of make that bit more of an effort.
Saying that though, JP, did that Paul Mason on the NFL the other week just to counteract that?
I don't think JP is going to say anything bad about Paul Mason.
No, I couldn't say anything bad about it. At times he's made me want to, but no, God love him.
But also, like you're saying there, JP, you're right there. Like, they've always had the pick of the best games. Like, because I'm thinking of a sport where, because even I was thinking the darts, they've been so loyal to the PDC, is it? But even some of them are on ITV4 now, aren't they? Some of the lesser tour events. Because even the golf at one point went to Setanta Golf, didn't it, Liam? That was a big thing. I know that through me mate there. So is there anything they've actually had themselves? Like, obviously the WWF was the one, WWE wrestling, but that's obviously gone now. I don't think they've had one consistent. F1 they're quite big on now, but obviously that was on terrestrial, weren't it? So it shows you what they try and see as the biggest sport and push, because F1's been pushed down the throats the past. I mean, I'm not into it at all, lads, but it gets pushed to hell, doesn't it? Really? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
It does. It's a game of niches when it comes to sports coverage. You've just got to get loads and loads of niche sports. So even on Wednesday, for example, they had an absolute belting State of Origin game. Now, that may not appeal. That's never going to appeal to a mass audience. But for rugby league fans, it's like, well, this is as good as rugby league gets. So I'm going to make sure that I've got access to this to be able to watch State of Origin. And it also helps as well because of the breadth of Sky, whether it's going into things like Star Sports in like South Africa or Fox Sports in not so much in the States, but in Australia and New Zealand. They've always had access to they've always thought of that round the clock aspect of sport as well.
About to say that, JP,
and
definitely.
they've done and that's the thing. It's that extra mile, it's that extra bit of dedication. Whereas you mentioned Eurosport in there, and I've got a lot of fondness for Eurosport.
Same here.
But Eurosport was always limited by what budget did it have. The thing it
Skiing,
did have
skiing on Eurosport, didn't it, lads?
skiing, cycling, New Japan at one point,
Bushido, Liam.
Bushido,
Bushido, yeah.
And then, but then it always managed to, like, I mean, the thing that Eurosport was had Euro goals was just at a time when it was access to domestic European football, even in the briefest of highlight forms. And that was a big deal. And then when that was able to be sold off by the various like football associations around the world, and now we get to the point where, I mean, God knows what any of these are on. I think like La Liga, for me, I end up watching on like Premier Sports and stuff like that.
DAZN or something.
I'll tell you one more, Eurosport, lads, the Superbikes, is it? That was always on Eurosport. I loved it.
I didn't realise people did cycling as a sport when I was a kid until I watched Eurosport for like an hour. You know, if you watch Eurosport back then, it was weightlifting, winter sports,
definitely,
and cycling. He was like, this is incredible. But no, so that was a broad conversation on Sky and its impact.
Love it.
Move on to something else that may have made an impact on myself and Matty, more so being the age we were back in the 90s. So June 15th, Art Attack makes its debut on children's ITV. Presented by Neil Buchanan, the show would run in its initial form until May 2007, after ITV announced it would be closing down its in-house children's TV production unit. Now, I have a lot of fondness for Art Attack. As I alluded to, I was 4 years old at this point. Probably started watching it a little bit later on in my infancy. But when the choices on TV were superheroes, you know, things being blown up, vivid colours, Art Attack was still always appointment viewing. If a 6-year-old, 7-year-old me was intrigued by an art show, for somebody who had no interest in art at that point in time, and rather be playing out on a bike or kicking a ball, I think it says for a lot of people of my generation how much of an influence Neil Buchanan had on children and had on children's TV at the time. I think everybody at one point has seen an episode of Art Attack. They all fondly remember his big art attacks at the end of the episode, where he would do a big sculpture or a big display based around something like he would do the Queen's head out of pound notes, and you wouldn't see the final product until the end. And just generally using stuff like we see on screen now, using stuff that could be found around the house to create stuff and to create art. Whereas Blue Peter was always a little bit too straight-laced for me, and not for my group of friends at that period of time. We wouldn't go home and watch Blue Peter, but we would go home to watch Art Attack. And again, I'm sure Matty's got a lot to say about Neil Buchanan, but influence-wise, I really don't think it can be understated in terms of the influence he had on kids of my age at that point.
Mate, like, Neil Buchanan, JP, like, honestly, this is like, he's fresh out of NXT, and he's like 1990 through into the big time here, JP. And as you say, Liam, before, in about mid-90s, he'd absolutely nailed it, hasn't he? Like, he was the man. He was the absolute man when it comes to stuff. As you say, just being, like, stuck to me telly, watching this. Like, I was always ITV over BBC for the kids' shows after school. Always for me. Never. It was always too, as you say, they were Blue Peter. It was just too serious, BBC.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas ITV had some kind of series, but it was always just more fun. It was just always more accessible for me. So that's why I always like Woof, spats, woof, unbelievable. Honestly, Funhouse, Finders Keepers. When Buchanan had that, as they come out of NXT, JP, he's in his full WWE run with Finders Keepers, getting all the belts, getting everything. But he was great. And look at this, even like the plop at the beginning, I just took me right back. But my only gripe here, Liam, and I'm absolutely like yesterday's old, whatever you want to say, what the phrase is. I'm not happy with this or the head in this, mate. This isn't my head. This isn't.
No,
I'm not happy at all.
I agree.
Oh, what's going on?
Agree.
You can tell it's a
I agree.
pilot. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, the head did evolve to something.
He was the start of the show, wasn't he? Really?
Oh, yeah.
You can't let him have the limelight. The head was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, look at this fella here. Not real to me. This isn't Liam. I'm not happy. No.
So, JP, just generally speaking about Neil Buchanan, do you remember him on, was it number 73 and Motor Life as well? He was on before Art Attack. So he was an established TV, possibly not as big as he would become after Art Attack, but he was on kids' TV before this, wasn't he?
He was a familiar face. And I mean, having gone back and watched this particular episode today, and I watched it with Vicky, and Vicky didn't remember this particular episode, but she was like, "No, I remember watching Art Attack," and it was, you could just see there was just the level of enthusiasm. He's just like a very good kids' TV presenter, because he's walking a very fine line between being condescending, and that's how I always found. Like when you mentioned about Blue Peter, I've got quite a hatred of Blue Peter, because it, as we've said many times, it's like, come home from school and do more schoolwork. No, fuck off. Yeah. Like, he wasn't asking you to do it.
Exactly. It was fun. Go and get something from the cupboard, from the drawer, instead of like, do your textbooks again. I agree there, JP.
Or you could just watch him and just go, there's a level of entertainment. So you could see why this would just be a really big show. It was just sort of like, in some ways, kind of sad that when I would have been of the target age, there wasn't someone like this. It was Heart Attack, and what was it? The Tony Hart.
Tony Hart, JP.
Yeah.
Is he the Lou Fez? Is he? How old is he back in the day?
Yeah. It was very much like kind of like wrist locks and drop downs. Like it was just like, oh, here we go. Like the most sort of like dull. Like it was just like, oh my god, like really like quite dull stuff. Whereas this is done really well. I mean, there's a few things I've read about this, about him selling the rights to the series for 14 million.
Oh, good on him.
And you just think, well, yeah, fair play, mate. You've developed a concept here. It completely works. It's got a mass audience and brought some new, fresh energy to kind of kids' TV as well.
Yeah.
And he was in a punk band for a large way called Marseille. Is that right?
Yeah, a British heavy metal band. Really like early, I think it was like 1976 or so, and he was in there for a while, and then he eventually left because he actually became a consultant for children TV roles, which you can fully understand based on his work here. But yeah, won 2 BAFTA awards as well, ran from 1990 to 2007, so got a good run in Matty. That's the initial form, and then as JP said, the IP was kind of sold around the world where different hosts and stuff took over.
Well, what about a bit more Neil Buchanan lore here, Liam? I think we've had this though, but I'll quiz you again. What famous character did he play in another ITV children's show, mate?
Well, I think the answer is Zap, isn't it?
It is.
Is it Smarty Arty or something?
It is, mate. It's an artist. He's very typecast, very not a method actor, JP, is he?
Sticks to what he knows.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to hit me with the bigger fact that he is actually Banksy as well, isn't it?
That was the big rumour. 2020, he had to come out and publicly say that he wasn't Banksy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he had to put out a statement, didn't he, confirming that he wasn't Banksy because the rumour had picked up so much steam. But yeah, again, another programme, and we say this a few times when we go through the television here on Time, that a programme that wouldn't have worked without its host. The host is so imperative to the show itself. So yeah, Neil Buchanan, for my generation and my era growing up, an absolute god of a TV presenter. Whatever he's doing now, more power to him.
Yeah. If there is a thing where as well, like there would have been a point in time, and I'm surprised it never happened with him necessarily, where he would have just been picked up and asked, like, you'd be so good at kids TV that you're asked to host like a game show in prime time and stuff like this. And like, look, he did all right out of the whole thing. I don't think he's shedding too many tears about how his career went and stuff like that. But it's amazing to me that there wasn't like ITV executives didn't say, this guy's actually really fucking good.
Mm.
Why don't we get him to do why don't we get him to do sort of like game shows and Saturday night rather than trying to hire Bruce Forsyth, as we'll come on to in a little bit.
Lastly, the Buchanan law for you, Liam. In the last series of Finders Keepers, who joined as his co-host, and we've spoke about it many a times before on this show. It's not Danny Bear for once. Who is it?
I was liking this week on another grapple show as possibly somebody's best uncle, based on my knowledge, and it would be very uncly of me not to know that the co-host was Jet from Gladiators.
It was, my friend. What a duo that is.
Were they the two biggest stars in ITV at that period in time?
1,000,000%.
Yeah,
1,000,000%. Love it.
But so that's Art Attack. And then, as we usually do with time, we'll move on to a couple of game shows. And let's start with the first one, June 1st. The $64 million question returns to UK television after a 38-year hiatus. Originally broadcast by ATV in 1956, the new series is hosted by Bob Monkhouse. Now, Matty, where do we rank Bob Monkhouse in terms of show presenters? Is he up there? Is he on the Mount Rushmore of British
100%.
TV presenters?
Yeah, 100% for me. Like it's and like even this, like I once again, with it being June 1990, I am not familiar. Like these two game shows you plucked out, Liam. This rings a bell with the title, but it didn't know obviously it come back. And the one we're going to talk about after this, I'd never even heard of. Never heard of it in my life. But you put Monkhouse in any game show, in any situation, whether it be a comeback like this, whether it be a brand new game show, Liam, he's definitely on the Mount Rushmore. He's the first, one of the first you call. For me, I don't know if you guys agree, he's one of the first people you call. I know these are all ex-comedians and such, but the transition's just smooth. Like, and he's not, he's quite funny still as well. Like some of them, you go, oh, what? You don't like this opening speech by someone who you want them just to get to the game show. But him and Roy Walker are actually quite funny still. So, yeah, always got time for Bob. Definitely on the Rushmore.
Well, Bob, it was a sad event when Bob had his joke book stolen, because it was like a hell of a joke book.
Yeah.
Because it's amazing. He was someone who was just designed, rather than being a comedian, to be a game show host. Now, I've probably got more fondness for what was the show he did on BBC during the day, and it's not coming to mind immediately.
Wipeout's the best. Wipeout's unreal.
Well,
it was Daniels took over that, didn't he?
But whenever films would come up, you would just see, and I've mentioned this times before, it would just be like a light bulb came and he had like this encyclopedic knowledge of film.
Yeah.
And it was just like, this is not a bloke who's half-arsing. He genuinely knows about this stuff. But he is smooth. It was just like, you look at him and think of like a Des O'Connor. Des O'Connor was someone who may well have had that game show presenter look and may well have had that game show presenter vibe, but Bob is smooth in all aspects of this. Although, I do have to mention with this show in particular, I love the way it goes. It's the $64,000 question. The prize, they go, well, it's not in dollars. And so you think, all right, £64,000. That's even better with the exchange rate. It's like, no, 6,400, which they're building up as the biggest one on British TV. So you're like, right, okay.
Yep.
That's not great. But what is really a speeding up version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
That's what I've been noticing. It's Millionaire. That's where they got the concept from, didn't they? Tarrant and whatever media company. What's the company who made it? Oh.
Endemol.
Endemol. There you go. I fucking knew. That's why I love you, Liam. I just need you on my shoulder.
The old Big Brother, weren't they?
Yeah. But Monkhouse as well. Celebrity Squares was another absolute corker that I hope we can do at some point on this series of time. But I know this is the thing, and I'm taking this from Sky /B Sky B before, where like you take these like game show hosts for granted, really, because it's a big thing now, isn't it? We speak about wrestlers joining different companies. These just seem to go back and forth from BBC to ITV like it was nothing. Like, was it a big thing in the papers at the time when like they signed to ITV? Like it must have been, mustn't it? Because he's turning up one day on Wipeout and repeats, and then he's doing a brand new show on ITV. It must have been big news, JP.
It was, particularly with Bruce Forsyth, who was seen as like the kind of benchmark for when he would get
the Hogan, JP.
Very much the Hogan for it as well, and it was always like for really like big money. Like it always felt like, and in an era where, as you're saying, like Sky wasn't the monolith it is now, so you are still relying on 4 channels. two of which are only in competition with each other. So, like, they would jump backwards and forwards in there. And game shows were still very much at this point the staple of like
Prime
early
time,
evening
JP.
prime time TV.
Saturdays, Wednesday. Like I remember, sorry, but Michael Barrymore, that's why I always say he got paid the most, didn't he? Like he was $5 million a year, mid-90s, because he was always on ITV, wasn't he? As far as I'm aware. So that he must have offered him that big money for him not to jump. But like he had the show, like he had the show like your Saturday night prime, but he'd be Sunday night prime time. Strike It Lucky was fucking Monday night prime time. He was never off the telly. Do you know what I mean? So like these were big stars in the country though, weren't they at the time? These game shows, they were absolutely humongous because, as you said, 4 channels, and they were on, like, as you say, prime time of a night, like, just big stars, the lads, big stars.
Yeah, just carrying on from what JP said about the grand prize and this being £6,400 at the time. That was due to a rule by the Independent Television Commission that made the prize money so low at the time. It was £3,200 in the original $64 million question. But the reason there was a cap on it was based around the quiz show scandals in America, which was something we referred to on a previous episode when we discussed the film quiz show in terms of that was the $64 million question, I think, as well, that the scandal took place on. So this had to ask for special dispensation to allow them to get to the prize money for the $64,000 question. And then afterwards, that was lifted in 1993, that cap on prize money on game shows, which obviously ushered in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, because the prize money had got so much greater at the time. But I don't know if I mentioned this before, but a little aside about Bob Monkhouse, the first person in this country to own a video recorder. Love that fact.
He's even better than he. Even it's enhanced him even more.
Ahead of the curve, mate.
Yeah.
He apparently had one of the richest TV archives in the world at one point, because he had a video recorder before so many people, to a point that I think he sold so many of his tapes to the BBC because he was the only person who had copies of programming that they had shown, because the price of recording TV show was so expensive and tapes were so expensive that when they were shown live, these tapes would be recorded over with other shows and stuff. So the archive at the BBC didn't really exist for a period of time. But Bob Monkhouse apparently had all of them, and they bought a load of tapes off him.
And he always...
But Fritz von Erich learned from him, didn't he?
But he always looked great as well, didn't he? He always looked the part as well.
Yeah.
Always smart, the old pocket square, tan, hair done sound. Yeah, always looked the part.
Do you think he's another one that was straight on the course after filming, Matty?
Oh, mate, never had a put, was he, on Marbella. He's always the end of the times on the course with El Tell himself, Des Line, club with them. Love it.
But yeah, talking about game show royalty, let's move on to the next game show. June the 2nd, so the day after the $64,000 question returned, Bruce Forsyth returns to the BBC with a new game show titled Takeover Bid. Described as a reverse game show, the basic premise of the show was that contestants would be given prizes at the beginning of the game and then try and keep them until the end. Now, JP, any memories of this, or is this one of Bruce's ill-fated ventures in the game show world?
It is. I think conceptually, I can see what it's doing, but it is a vehicle built around a star. But it's not great because the prizes themselves aren't great. So there isn't that element of jeopardy to it. I think one of them had, what was it? Their 1-star prize was a tin of paint. Yeah. And I did find myself going, what the hell am I watching here? I'd never heard of this show beforehand.
No, I haven't seen it.
But there was, like, for example, when Bruce Forsyth was first stolen in the 1970s, say stolen, he was first poached to go to ITV from the BBC after being big on the Generation Game and stuff. His big light entertainment show, he had like pensioners playing Pong against each other and stuff like that. That was a thing that he had going on. So it was more, look, it's Bruce Forsyth, so therefore people will watch. And the game show aspect feels like it's kind of incidental. And you just look at this and go, there's bits of this that is meant to be like vaguely Generation Game, and they're trying to do something with the concept on here. It didn't work for me because as much as $64,000 question is very much straight to the point, you kind of know what you stand. There's a bloke who knows loads about Gilbert and Sullivan, so I'm going to ask you a load of questions about Gilbert and Sullivan, and the other one about Beatrix Potter. Here, it's just kind of all over the shop with some vaguely risque jokes from Bruce, but I had no recollection of this before watching this.
Go ahead, sorry, Liv.
No, Kevin.
No, I'm the same, JP. Never knew it existed, and this has got to be the biggest dud on Bruce's resume for me. This is like, no, it's bad. It was bad. Like, I couldn't believe, like you, JP. It's like, what's going on? Like, is this like they give him this back? And I mentioned him being the Hogan there before in jest, but like when you think about it, he got even bigger after this, though, didn't he? Like who are we talking on the scales of wrestlers here? This big run.
This is Dungeon of Doom. This is his Dungeon of Doom run.
People.
Who was sticking him in there? Like Kevin Sullivan. Right. Okay.
He does have a slight resemblance to a mustache-less Hulk Hogan from around.
He does. But this is like, but then Generation Game makes a huge comeback, doesn't it? Obviously, then he goes back to ITV and smashes it with Price is Right and Play Your Cards Right. Like, it's remarkable. And then he gets that, what are we calling it, JP? The conventions run with Strictly Come Dancing, I don't know. Or even bigger WrestleMania run, I don't know. Like, even big on that. Just, you couldn't keep him down, though, could you? After this dud, you'd think he was gone. But you just can't keep a star down, JP. So, fair play to him.
I think it's time to. Sorry, go on, Liam.
No, I was going to say that he did this after You Bet on ITV. Now I have no recollection of him doing You Bet.
I thought that was just Kelly.
Yeah, I had it as Matthew Kelly. So assumption wise is that Matthew Kelly took over You Bet when Brucey went back to the BBC. But not the best of vehicles to give him this, wasn't. Where do we stand on what's Brucey's big big game show host of the year era? Are we going Price is Right? Are we Generation Game?
For me,
Play Your Cards Right.
Yeah, agreed.
I think Generation Game. I'm trying to think of what the Generation Game is like match wise. That might be this like New Japan 5-star classic that I just can't get my head around. The Generation Game. I realized that it's huge and it was popular. It's just not for me. I'm more half an hour. Price is Right for me. I know that's took from American. Most game shows probably are, aren't they, Liam? You'll know more than me. But Price is Right for me is that's one of my favourite. Even like when God bless him and looked after me mum, like she loved Challenge TV, and I'd even watch the Price is Right back to back with her. I'd record them. I could just watch them all day. It was just
Same
like, one of the best. I've got it, lads. One of the best shows of all time. Like
without taking it down a Price is Right rabbit hole on here, it's the simplicity of the concept. We were all very much, and particularly of the time it was on, all aware of a pack of cards. So we knew how that worked. And it's higher or lower. It's not complicated. But at the same time, you get given a 7 or an 8, you're like, oh shit, you got to think about this.
Genius. It is.
It's in its simplicity.
Yeah.
It just kind of worked. And I think that's sometimes like why that's never been brought back. I don't know. It's something about playing cards banned on TV. If so, like ITC, have a look at yourselves and sort that out immediately. ITV, that's the kind of shit you should be putting on. It's easy. It's not complicated. Telly, just stick it on after Corrie, for Christ's sakes.
But like
as we always say about the best game shows that we cover here on time, it's the strength of them that it can appeal to the whole family. Something like Play Your Cards Right. It was an ageist game show in terms of you could be a kid up until a grandparent and enjoy it because the rules were so simple and it was just so melded together by him as a host as well.
But Liam, that's what you just said there, and I know even in between, but I think that's what it was like, because I remember watching it with like my nan. Like it'd be me and me nan watching the game shows, and then like my uncles and older brother and older sister wouldn't be really asked, but it'd be that gap of like, you know, a fucking 10-year-old and a 70-year-old sitting there together watching something on TV that you probably don't get anymore, which is sad, like in a way. Sorry to get all emotional tonight, lads, but it's sad. It's like everyone, and I know everyone likes to watch the certain stuff on their own, but that feeling, And that's why we do this show, like, just to get even if there's any young ones listening out there who finds this show, it's like you sat down with your family, JP, and you watched telly, didn't you? And this is what happened back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, fun without getting sort of like into the bigger meta conversation about about what time is for a lot of the part. We're talking about water cooler TV and TV as a communal kind of thing. So we're going to be the sport we speak about. It's like you just brought back, you know, going into reception theory in media, where it's where you watch it and who you're watching it with is as important as to what you're watching, because that then influences the conversation you're having. And then you'd go into school / work, wherever, the next day, and you'd speak to people about this, and they also would have watched it. And we don't have it in this fragmented media landscape. And that is something that's missing, because that would be a driver of a conversation, and that people would chat about other stuff the way that human beings would do as well. So, bring it all back.
Well, no, so 2 fantastic game shows we covered here, and just to confirm, there was no doubt that Brucey was straight on the course. This game show finish.
He owned it.
I'm surprised he didn't do it in a pair of golf shoes.
What a quick exit. But no, so that's the game shows. And now we're just going to have a brief look over the soaps at the time. EastEnders, Coronation Street and Brookside. We'll start with EastEnders here. And a different time for EastEnders to what I personally was used to. A lot of recognizable faces, but a lot of people who were coming to the end of their big run in the square. Most notably, the heartthrob of the time, Nick Berry, who played Simon Wicks, hot off his dazzling pop career, and just before the major ITV vehicle Heartbeat would put him into homes of every nan in the country on a Sunday evening. But yeah, this episode of EastEnders, just to briefly go over it, Janine had gone missing. A young Janine, obviously played by a completely different
still a bitch
actress. Yep. So Pat's out across the square looking for Janine, and eventually ends up at Arthur, Michelle and Pauline's, where she spends most of the episode drinking tea and resting her bad ankle.
How boring is that house though, JP? Arthur and Pauline, mate. You'd want to run anywhere else in the whole square, the whole world. Fucking hell.
No wonder Mark Fowler was fucking about. Of course he would do. So avoid being at home.
And then, and possibly the big thread that was going through this, which culminates at the end of the episode, is favourite of the panel, Gillian Tailforth, Kathy Beale, finds a recording of Simon Wicks professing his love to Cindy, who at the time
through the baby monitor.
Through the baby monitor, who was at the time
technology back in the day,
in a relationship with Ian Beale. So so Ian Beale's been done over as early as 1990. At this point, a storyline that would continue throughout the run of EastEnders into the 90s and then into the 2000s.
Mate, it was going on at Christmas in 2024.
And they say wrestling can't come up with creatively new stuff, JP.
And isn't Cindy in EastEnders currently as well?
Yeah.
And she was with Ian Beale.
She's died 3 times.
And she was also having an affair with the bloke who was with the woman who owns the Queen Vic. There was all of this stuff going on, because I remember just being incredulous of going, how has Beale fool me once? Shame on you. Fool me twice. This is very much, well, Beale, you've walked into this one, mate. I don't know why you thought anything was going to be different in this. Incredible stuff. But she's very young at this point, isn't she, Michelle Collins?
I was going to say, she looked young there. And it's even like that first scene, like the set, the house of the 70s, look at it. Like there's no upgrade. Because when it cuts to outside, it looks modern. This looks like genuinely the 70s. Same with Corrie later on, to a degree. Although they brought it on a little bit in some of the characters. I know you've got like a Ricky who's young, but it's just that brown, dull, grey, like just that aesthetic. That was like what I always said. Everyone just looked old because of the surroundings. It was just, yeah, in a way, like just weird.
Speak for
times.
yourself. Frank's only 24 there.
I wouldn't be surprised, Liam.
It's still a slightly like strange time in EastEnders because EastEnders only starts in 85.
Yeah.
So like it is 85 when it starts.
Yeah,
it is.
Same year as WrestleMania. Always remember
that.
Oh yeah. Well, it works. So in some ways, what are they doing? Like, and this is the thing we'll find with certainly this and Corrie, where they're trying to phase out your Don Morocco types who are still around there on the card, your George the Animal Steels and whatnot, who are around the place. They've introduced this meta threat of a development on the square and like the thing with and setting up Ian Beale's like potential heel turn later down the road as well for his dad and whatnot. This is pre-Bianca. For those of you who are able to watch the video, I don't know how the copyright strikes will work for this. Let's just assume most EastEnders tends to get blocked for the YouTube version for this. So get yourself onto the Patreon. Watch it
on video. How seriously, like, what would you do, like, in this conversation? Like, what are they talking about? It's something shit, isn't it, JP? It's something crap. What they talking about?
I mean, let's be honest here. Even the fruit looks bored, doesn't
it? It was always the house from hell, the foul. Because, like, for Michelle, again, it would explain why she shacked up with Dirty Den at that point in time.
She ran off to America. Good on her. Did she?
Like, and I think there's an incredible, like, there's a plot twist that I had no recollection of. Sorry for ruining a show from 35 years ago, but there was a like the fact that Den and Angie weren't Sharon's parents, and I was genuinely gobsmacked. I was like, what? Like, this was the thing. Like, I had no recollection of it. It's like, it must have been a big deal, obviously, at the time for that to be the case. And obviously, he's got like Shell going to visit like Sharon's parents as well, and stuff like this. I mean, Pauline is still a cow. She's not as much of a heel as what she becomes, like post the death of Arthur.
Yeah.
Like at that point, she just goes like full on evil. Like for a really long time.
Genuine question now at this point, right, in 2025, with all these mega names that EastEnders have had, they've got to be all related at some point. They've got to be, haven't they? When you know you're by marriage, don't see. I'm not even messing. Like, I'm seriously, if you sat down and you went, Phil has probably shacked up and got a kid with Sharon, who's shacked up and been with like fucking whoever. You honestly could make a list and they're all related by marriage.
I mean, it'd be a brave choice of a producer to have a kid with two heads or something like in there as well. Going, well, this is the natural outcome, isn't it?
I mean, it might be time for our friend Dwayne to get another big bloodline projection out to
Phil Mitchell at the top as the high chief, and then someone else. Oh, yeah, wow.
But it was at least we got a Janine origin story. She was always evil. That's what it was. Even her apology to Pat was like very, very half-hearted in a pre-Bianca world as well. It was like it was this episode, I suppose, in some ways you kind of think, okay, it'll be quite lively because you've got these crossing over these time periods, but there isn't as much of that in this particular episode of EastEnders.
Because when we move on to Corrie, they try it with that as well. There's always going to be with the soaps like that. Obviously, the youngsters like trying to be the fresh and current and hip and cool, you know, what characters that relate to real life, you know, because it's, you know, that demographic. You know, once again, it was appointment telly. You watched it any age. It was always on every day or 3-4 nights a week, wasn't it? The soaps.
Yeah.
But like I always think, like you're saying there, Bianca and people like that, and the Battersbys, I know that was more Les, I suppose, but the younger characters that genuinely crossed over and give it the shot in the arm, that's why they're iconic, JP. You know, Bianca is one of the, like, out of nowhere, just come in and just shook her up, didn't she? Like, genuinely.
And she's being put over by some of the older cast as well, aren't they? They're willing to do the jobs. They?
They willing to take back down in the conversations.
It's very much like a New Japan hierarchy where they're willing to go back down and work in kind of multi-man tags at the bottom of the card, aren't they? At that point, minor storylines. They're not all like, you know, they're not all trying to hang on to the main event positions. They understand that to be the case, but yeah.
But yeah, so if if EastEnders was a little bit looking behind in the times, let's move on to Coronation Street, which were trying to move with the times, as the brewery Newton and Ridley are looking to buy the Rovers Return and develop it into a theme American bar. Again, on the subject of the Americanization of society, the Rovers is being turned into a theme bar called Yankees. So the brewery have come to Bet and Alec, who are running the pub at this time, and telling them that they have to move with the times or move on out. Now, this episode goes through the revelation that Deirdre, who is number one on the street, has sold up or has been offered a very handsome bid by the brewery to sell up her property so that the Rovers can extend. And the brewery in this episode are talking to Bet and Alec, let's say, regarding moving on to another pub called the Quarryman's Rest while they take over the Rovers. So whoever watched this episode, Matty, did you see this?
I've seen this.
Would you have bought a pint in Yankees, or were you strictly a staunch Rovers Return man?
I would like to have thought that I would have been a staunch Rovers, but whether would have heard at the time, Liam, of an American bar coming on the end of my street, I would have brought it my own seat, mate. I would have had my own little booth in there, mate. So I probably would have sold out. Yeah, Jim weren't happy. Percy weren't happy. There was a few that weren't happy. Where they were. But it's one of them as well. Like,
was Percy ever happy?
well, I think he was fearing a hot pot with French fries was soon to come to the menu.
But you're saying there about American, like Baldwin would just fit right in on Wall Street, wouldn't he? He was our equivalent of like a Gecko or someone at that time, when he's just missing a mobile, but he had one in the car, didn't he? I think Baldwin, so he used that like
car phone.
The car phones. He had one, mate. But yeah, this was incredible. Once again, it's like, because I'm going a bit Benno here. I think Benno ate in wrestling pre like 1986, maybe. I'm the same with 1996, probably. Yeah, well, Leo, at least you said it, not me. But like with the soaps, I'm that like anything pre like 93, 94. Yeah. It's just like a different world to me. And obviously, I know the characters, but it's like it just I can't resonate. It's just weird. I've got that mental block with it, guys. It's like, and can I just throw an early one in here? How old is Julie Goodyear in this episode, lads?
We've done this on a previous one.
Have we done it? I have to find out. Come on.
And Gareth was mortified. So I think she's a lot younger than she looks. I'm going to say 42.
What do you reckon, JP?
I'm going to just go. I'm going to say 50.
How old are you, JP? Don't mind me asking.
I'm 46.
Okay, all right. She's 48 in this episode, so you've got a couple of years yet. But seriously, you're still in the same ballpark.
If I introduce her to my mum, and I say, it's my mum, and it was Bet Lynch, she'd be like, yeah, fair enough. My mum weirdly does look a bit like Bet Lynch as well. Certainly the same hair as well. She loves having that kind of like perm on there. Bloody
but
hell.
It's that, but it's even, I just love that big, like, show. Well, it was half a show long storyline of Ivy trying to get that reference off Baldwin. How simple but great it though. But they made it entertaining for half an hour. They did, like, Baldwin threatening not to give it like it's this big figure, and she was happy. But then I didn't follow it on to see what because he given it, but I'm not having it was what she wanted. It was something cocked up or heelish with it, and I didn't follow the omnibus through because
what was the reference for to be on an episode of The Word?
Yeah. But this is what I was saying about the young like the signer, like, is it Jenny, who I know from she come back 10 years ago, didn't she? And like, I think she's still in it now, Jenny. But that was one of them characters when she come back that everyone was like, oh, Jenny's back. And I was like, who? Because it's pre-me at all. And now it's weird seeing her but actually has the same actress as well. It's weird seeing that there's a bit of continuity there. So, and this was like the younger storyline at the time.
I bet he would have drunk in Yankees.
Yeah.
Oh, this bloke on here. Yeah. I remember this bloke on here from Dead Man's Shoes.
Oh,
He's
of
the
course,
bloke who
yeah.
Paddy Considine speaks to at the beginning in the
Yes,
pub.
of course
He's
he
like,
is. Yes.
what are you looking at, man? You cunt. Like, it's like, which he doesn't say in this episode, sadly. Like,
But
he's
I
generally
knew-
quite nice.
For a fact, he'd work in the garage with Kev. He just knew that. Yeah, he's not going to work nowhere else with all the oldies. He's going to be in the garage.
Double earrings, mate. He's
that's
working there, isn't he?
That's the proper run for the young stars, isn't it? You do your 3
Yeah.
months with Kevin under a Nissan Bluebird, and like then you move on to pastures new, and you've had the brush, haven't you?
He's defo the Jerry Jarrett. You're not getting a payday off Kevin when you're that young as well.
No.
It's experience, Matty. Come
Experience, life experience, mate. The opportunity. Beto, legend Betty. Yeah, we all agreeing.
Yeah.
We all wanted to
yeah.
try one of them hot pots, didn't we, lads? Come on,
Yeah.
unbelievable legend. Jack as well with the bit of sticky tape to all this glass. Just absolute iconic. Like, obviously, just once again,
Young Curly.
Young Kevin Kennedy. He's loving it there, JP. But it's one of those serious notes. Once again, I know they're absolutely on their ass these days. The soaps, they are, aren't they? Like, they've tried everything, they're dying of death. But you can't understate again on why we do this show how iconic and big stars these characters and actors and actresses were, weren't they? Like, JP, they were humongous. Front page stuff on the for papers, just big names.
Just to give you an idea of the time, like the paper that Alec was reading there has Forrest Pylon more agony for under pressure Ferguson, which just tells you about the time that this was. This is when Alex Ferguson was genuinely, they might need to get rid of him at Man U. It's not working.
But you know why I love it as well? I know they had their old team. They need the Weatherfield. What were they called? They had their own football team. Corrie, was it called?
It'd just be Weatherfield FC, wouldn't it?
But it was primarily a Man City like support win. It was never Man United. If anyone supported anyone a real team, it was always Man City. Yeah, that's why I always liked it as well at the time.
But now, again, Coronation Street, very much of its time here. And then just to finish off with the soaps and to finish off with television, I think JP may have been the only one who saw a lot of this. But Brookside, again, yeah, a bit of a shock to the system regarding who some of the big characters are within this episode. But anybody you more familiar with at the time?
Mate, the only person in this I was familiar with really was Sinbad. And it was young Sinbad as well. I was watching it and I was thinking, is Max having an affair? Because the copy, the copy that was on YouTube wasn't, it wasn't exactly 1080p. But here, this bloke here, I assumed that was Matt, and it was a close up. I was like, it's not him. And then I got completely thrown. I was like, I don't know who these people are. And then there's some bloke who's selling up as well. I mean, in there, you think Sinbad's having parties. Sinbad has a load of beer being delivered as well, and he's getting a load of. It seems to be like just basically persecuting him. Like, and I don't understand why. In some sort of like it's just like neighbor feuds gone completely out of hand. There's I can't remember the name of one of the fellas in it. It was a bald character who effectively felt like he was replaced by Ron and the Dixons as well at some point.
I've never seen these myself in my life, JP.
This is Brookside very much happy to be like number 3. This is, isn't it? Yeah. This is proper ECW.
Eastern, Eastern Championship Brookside. Like, that's what this is, isn't it?
As we get to the mid 90s, we want to be on TNN. We're on pay-per-view. Yeah. Pretty much going to undo us in the end because we haven't really got the storylines to sustain this. This is really, again, this is Don Morocco in ECW Arena.
It is. Yeah. Sinbad might as well just have a surfer gear on at this point. be the Sandman at that point in time.
Before he got the ladder and the window cleaning bucket, JP.
He does have a ladder in it.
Does he?
He hasn't pulled out any cigarettes. No, there's a leak in the ceiling that he's house sitting for.
Nah,
I couldn't tell you who these people are.
No,
I really couldn't.
Barry and Terry must be knocking about somewhere, but you used to get them episodes where your big stars weren't in it for some reason. Would you? Like sometimes did they do the? Yeah, is that Dave Bing Crosby though? Was that Crosby then?
Bing. It is Bing. Which is awesome on this as well.
Sinbad in his bills here, lads.
It was more this fella here who I recognise, but I couldn't remember anything about.
See, that's the Corkles. Oh, Frank Rogers. Is that Frank?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it is
Yes, Frank.
Rogers.
See,
Katie's-
they lived.
Katie's
Yeah,
dad.
Katie. That's the one who Jimmy killed when he had done his drunk driving. JP killed Ron's son, didn't he? And he killed Frank Rogers.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Yep,
Jesus
that's right,
Christ. Jesus. Well, that exactly at that point, though, they're very much influencing the Attitude Era that we would see.
But
on,
seriously, and also we
on
always say this
EastEnders.
about Jimmy. Have you ever seen a bigger face turn ever in your life in a soap? He was a big heel, JP. Really, Jimmy.
Mate.
It's usually the way around. Where it's easy to turn them heel. He turned face and got over. It's mad.
Did. Went a bit too far when he was a headmaster. I'll always mention that. It's like he would not have passed the DBS check on there as well. But like you say, I think this is just at the point where I think for Channel 4, which is still establishing its own identity at this stage as well.
Sammy Rogers there as well, by the way.
It's like we've got to have a soap. Soaps are the big thing of the day. We've got a game show in Countdown and then 15 to 1. So this is the other thing that we'll end up producing. And they'll just have that going along at the side. So, but it's very much like going through and it's like, well, we can't use London or Manchester, so we'll just use Liverpool. Yeah. And it's without thinking anything like really about making any of these storylines engaging.
No. So that concludes the soaps for June 1990. So, and that also concludes the television pillar. So I will pass it on to my good friend, who is JP. It's sport for JP, and it is very much centric on one event that happened or started in June 1990.
It was absolutely massive event at this point in time because it was Italia 90, which I know you fellas will have very little recollection of at this point in time. So it was a bit of this was my World Cup. That's probably the easiest way of saying it. This was 86 was the first one I saw, but I was still very young. Italia 90 not only was like a massive World Cup, but also if you think of the timings of it, because the games were in Mexico in 86, that are a bit all over the place. It was like like this was in primetime TV. It was what we're witnessing here is like the evolution of football, really. And this is where football changes. And there's been a documentary series about this. I know it's on Amazon Prime in a minute. I think Channel 4 had...
I've seen one off on Channel 4, JP, the documentary. Really good, that.
Yeah, how Italia 90 changed football. And it changed it in a multitude of ways. Now, what I will say at the beginning about this tournament is, for me, this is one of the worst World Cups ever. Like, it really is. And just to sort of give an overview of this as well, it kicked off on the 8th of June. And it had what became a traditional thing of having a massive upset with whoever the defending champions were at that point in time. So, and that happened like about, I want to say like 3 years in a row. Yeah. And 3 World Cups in a row, I should say, as Cameroon beat Argentina. This is Cameroon, who I think were they down to 9 men at one point? Yep. In there,
is that when Kinesia gets snapped about 5 times? JP running through
gets absolutely annihilated. The first red card, there's a few red cards in this tournament as well that would be in there. Only 24 teams in this World Cup, so this is like quite early doors. I mean, it's a throwback now to just have. We were talking about before we started recording that the fact that the next World Cup is across 3 countries in terms of the Americas, with Canada, Mexico, and the US. Then the one after that has got like 6, and then it's Saudi Arabia. They get to host their own one in there as well. And obviously, what would happen with this is inevitably it would be won by what was their last appearance as West Germany, winning the tournament, defeating Argentina in the final, who obviously won it in 1986 as well. And it was an Andy Bramer, the left back who played for Inter. I think I remember him being specifically at Inter, being there to win the World Cup as 1-0. But for me, there were so many kind of changes for this, because you mentioned about like what football was like when you were talking about Sky and about the absolute changes that's happened in there. There were so many like different things that came as a result. Like we
big
had
name there.
so much
Big name, sorry. Really
Oh,
big name. Video viewers.
Exactly. Like, there's so, like, I mean, you had obviously like Maradona being big in this country. People think of England and their run to the semi-finals. As an Ireland fan, this was Ireland's first appearance in a World Cup. They made it through to the quarterfinals, which is incredible because they didn't win a game in the tournament. Like, they scored 2 goals in open play. Like, it was bad. It was, like, football wise, it was bad. It was the last World Cup where the pass back rule had not come into play. So that was part of the reason they got rid of that, was this World Cup. The fact that it was just passing it back to the keeper, and it just killed games. And it can't be. And then that leads to the evolution of the sweeper keeper, because keepers had to be good with their feet as a result of this. We also had the Taylor report as well. And the Taylor report was something that was brought about after Hillsborough. And it was very much about, making stadiums kind of all-seater stadiums, getting rid of terracing.
How bad was the goalie there for the Argies?
Terrible. There's some terrible keeping in this as well. I mean, for you guys, before I wax lyrical more about this, and the other big point I would say about this is the World Cup where football is just not seen as just a working class game. This is one where it has appeal on a broader level for the entire country and became much more of a national event, even though hooliganism still was an issue. Like, did you guys have any recollection of this tournament whatsoever? Or is USA 94 the first one that you really remember?
I remember this World Cup. I don't remember it as vividly as I remember 1994, but I do remember this, and I do remember it felt important at the time. It felt important. As we mentioned when we were talking about Sky earlier, football was not very visible on television at the time. It was very much something that you would see highlights of, and you would see the odd game of, whereas this possibly being the first major tournament of the time for me, and all the games being broadcast on terrestrial television, it did seem like an event, because it felt I was seeing something that I wouldn't usually see, and that was live football. And then, as trivial as it may seem now, the fact of it would supersede all existing programming. Like we were talking about the soaps then. Soaps would be moved so games could be shown, sort of thing. And everywhere you looked at the time, the English national team was on newspapers, magazines. When we get to the music charts, obviously, songs in the charts as well. It felt like a big event at the time. And I do remember it. But possibly not as well as I remember 1994, but it did feel like an event.
How about you, mate?
Yeah, no, not at all, JP. Not on my radar at all. Like, even USA 94, I remember a couple of memories of that was obviously seeing the game, Ray Houghton's chip against Italy. I remember Maradona into the camera. This is at the time. And I remember staying up for the final, because it was a Sunday night, but it was like extra time and penalties. Yeah. And I remember watching, I had an old black and white TV in my bedroom. And like, my mum had gone way to bed. This must have been 10:30. And I shouldn't have been anywhere near allowed to stay up, only being like 7 or 8 at the time. I remember watching the whole of the penalties and watching Baggio sky in the final there. But I'm more of France 98. That's the one I remember watching every fucking minute of every game. But this question I will ask you, JP, here is like, you're saying it's like, it's big for every aspect. Would this be like the first time, like, because it's like, is Serie A getting shown here? Have we had access to Maradona? No. Is it seeing Maradona, the best player in the world, seeing him play? Klinsmans of the world, Hullets and all that. How are you seeing them? Unless you're watching like these events every 2 years, obviously with the Euros as well. Like it's wild,
That was primarily it. And if you would have had access to Eurosport, you might have had some Bundesliga or the odd Serie A highlights in there. But really, for football fans, these were people you read about. But there wasn't the money, because the Premier League wasn't a thing. It was still the first division. You didn't have the money, so you didn't have European stars coming to play in England. That just wasn't a thing.
I know it's against you.
It was all Serie A.
But I like with Tottenham, I mean. But like, was that why Ardiles and Villa at the time back then? Is that why it was a big thing? Because it just didn't happen, was it? Like, it's great to
well, from my limited memories of the time, possibly slightly after this, I always remember, as JP saying, Serie A being presented as the best league in the world.
It was, yeah, biggest names, most money.
I always remember Trans World Sport. Their football was always Serie A heavy because that's where the named players were.
Yeah.
And I think that played a lot into Channel 4 eventually getting like Football Gazzetta and a live game on a Sunday afternoon as well. Because that at one point was the only televised live football game outside of cup competitions that was on terrestrial television, wasn't it? The Italian La Liga on Channel 4, yeah.
That was like opposite it. You had, because of Sky, when Football Italia was on, you had what was effectively Division 2 or the Championship at that stage that was up against it, which kind of really told you like where it was. It was just a brilliant move by Channel 4, and it's partly this tournament, which is often if you're remembering it for the football really wasn't good. And I say this as a Republic of Ireland fan, and this is their greatest ever moment, reaching the quarterfinals of a World Cup. I mean,
it's iconic though, JP, and
it's
as you're saying
absolutely
there,
iconic.
I mean, like Gaza crying, in the semi-finals, but it's
Cameroon, Roger Miller,
JP, Nesham Dormer, isn't it? It's the highlights, like video package at the end of the tournament, BBC put together and stuff like that with that over it. It's like unbelievable.
And they weren't doing that for 86. So there was an element about how you actually present it. The stadiums looked incredible. They just for the time, it was just like, oh wow, these stadiums, like I remember the one in Genoa in particular is the one that stands out. Scotland were at this tournament as well, and as per usual for Scotland in a major tournament, didn't get out of the group stages. In fairness to them, this wasn't like the 74 or 78 where they actually had like really good strong sides with some excellent players. This time around, they didn't have that level of kind of star quality, and they had a tougher group in there as well. So like it's I think they lose to Costa Rica in this. They lose to Brazil, but they beat Sweden. For remembering for that, England.
So they won a game, JP.
They did win a game,
and
then they
Ireland
lost
didn't.
Brazil.
And then Ireland got to the quarters.
But Ireland had a group, and it was like, I mean, it was a horrible group at the time. It's because it was 24 teams, and they wanted 16 for the next stage.
The
third place would get through.
Yeah.
So Ireland were in a group where the first game was against England, and Gary Lineker scored. Then Kevin Sheedy scored the equaliser. I remember watching that in the public bar with my dad, which had all the Ireland fans in. Then the saloon bar, the fancy bar, had all the England fans in there as well. Then they drew with Egypt in an awful game that was 0-0, and then drew with Holland 1-1. I think Van Basten opens up the scoring, and Niall Quinn scores the equaliser there. So they went through, and it was basically because Egypt were the only team that lost the game. They lose to England due to a Mark Wright header. The last I remember about him was being sacked for racism as manager of Chester, I think it was. And I think as well, you look at the England side. I mean, this is Gaza, it's Gary Lineker, Chris Waddle was exceptional at this point in time as a player. He was like just so good.
Barnes, JP.
Barnes too. Yeah, he was.
But that's the whole conundrum of like people say he was never great for England when he was the best player in. Well, I was going to say the Premier League, but in England, wasn't he? He was
well, I mean, obviously he was incredible for Liverpool, but part of the issue always was, it was always the problem with England is they did have these excellent players, but why play them when you can play Steve Hodge? Why play a centre back who can pass the ball out when you can have Terry Butcher who can just bleed and say something about patriotism? Even down to keepers like Peter Shilton, who I always thought was just bang average, and because of a complete lack of competition, i.e., it was him or Chris Woods. That was basically it. There was really very little there. There was a lot of bang average players in the fullness of time, and we know this with England, who would end up in the squad because they feared Mavericks, and that's
still do, JP.
Still do. There still is but we need players to track back and whatnot. It's like that's why a David Batty would always make it into a squad. You'd never pick Matt Letizia.
But JP, even now, obviously we got to 2 finals and a semi-final, which is great consistency wise, similar to like Arsenal finishing. You know what I mean? To be there consistently is good, but you still got to get over the line. And we've had the probably equally the best squads in some of these tournaments when we had like Foden, Grealish in the pomp, all these attackers that we took, Harry Kane. There's still that handbrake, and we went to final, but we went 1-0 up in the first minute against Italy. Go for the juggler, and we would have won that game. We would have comfortably won that. Do you know what I mean? Difference against Spain to a degree, but that Italy one still haunts me.
That is, it's the big problem, and I think it will always be the problem that there's this like innate conservatism and fear of winning that becomes it's just a like a vicious circle, isn't it? With England and major tournaments as well. Because of the legacy of 1966 and the fact it is still brought up as a thing, there is the fear of that. Like when they would lose penalties and they'd want all this sympathy, it's like you never practice them, and it's a viable outcome in a knockout tournament that you could go to penalties. Why wouldn't you practice them? Well, why should we? And it's like, well, then when you go out, don't bitch about it. Like if you don't practice this stuff, then you're not gonna you know. Why would you like have much sympathy for it? Now it's different these days as well. Like I say, they do play with the handbrake on, and I think that's the thing about this as a tournament that it's. I'm trying to think of what World Cup would it be kind of similar to. There's this sort of shades of 2002. I think about this, whereby it wasn't a great World Cup overall. It's just sort of like Germany or West Germany were the most consistent side that were there. Argentina had won it 4 years before, and obviously they'd lost to Cameroon, but they weren't playing particularly spectacularly at all in there. They beat Italy in the semi-finals in a penalty shootout as well.
Was Maradona good in this World Cup, GP? Because like obviously
my memories of it,
86 really, but
yeah, my memory's not as much. The big star in a lot of this tournament was like Toto Schillaci for Italy. Of like he was the man who had kind of like come on the scene. You have a young Baggio as well, who scores one of the best goals within the tournament. There's David Platt is like makes a name and then ends up playing in Italy for large swathes of his career before he comes back to play for Arsenal as a result of his performances in this tournament as well. But it's a strange. There's no France here. Holland, even though they're European champions, like they're not the side that they were in 88. Spain at this stage were just the most habitual side for kind of like never
being
getting
hyped up but never winning.
Yeah,
but
they never get behind the quarterfinals in any major tournaments.
Like France is wild because they weren't here. They weren't in obviously USA 94, but then they win World Cup 98 on home soil. It's just weird, isn't it, that they weren't in any World Cup before that?
Yeah, there'd always be those internal rows and stuff like that. But the time it hits like France 98, they've got their youth system in place and things like this as well. And it was Bobby Robson's last hurrah, which is a thing within the review that we watched for this that he talks about quite a lot. He's like, this is my last tournament with England, and therefore it does feel. I think there's that a lot of the memories people would have is like England are really good in this tournament. I don't know if they really are. Like they struggle to get past Belgium. They struggle quite heavily against Cameroon, where they're losing at 1.21 before going on to beat them. Like against Germany, they're in it, but they're not like, and they come back from 1-0 down. Paul Parker's massive deflection, I think, from Andy Bramer from a free kick that ends up happening there as well. But it's a lot of the football is kind of dour, but it's almost like the changes that come about as a result of this tournament are things that help elevate football. Not so much even in 94, which again isn't the greatest of tournaments, but when it comes to France 98, I think that France 98 is a really good, strong World Cup, really good sides in there.
Really good.
Yeah. And we're at a point as well where weak sides are shit. They're really bad. We're just not in that era anymore. Bad sides know how to be tactically sound, but also be physically fit. Like, whereas they like here around 1990 and throughout a lot of the early 90s, just getting bullied off the ball and stuff. So I think this is a really like interesting World Cup, and it's a thing that kind of like say I'd heavily recommend everyone to watch how Italia 90 changed football, because that's a really big part of this. And but don't worry about going back and watching the games because a lot of it. I tried watching it with the Republic of Ireland. They're dreadful, even though they've got good players because they just play donkey football.
I was just going to add before we move on. Average number of goals per game in this World Cup was 2.2, which still remains the lowest amount of goals per game in a World Cup. For instance, France '98, which you referred to, was 2.6. So a lot greater at the time as well. You mentioned changes that come due to this World Cup. This was the last World Cup that was 2 points for a win. Is that correct? Every World Cup after this was three points for a win afterwards.
That's poor, that 2 points for a win. In my head, that's just like didn't exist ever. I'd never seen it. You know what I mean? It just does something that doesn't.
I think it was a case of FIFA held out for quite a few years, didn't they? And then they tried to move on and make a more attacking game on the basis of this World Cup by adding the extra point. But also, a little aside, this World Cup is the first ever event or contained the first ever program that was broadcast in HD TV. And that might blow a few people's minds.
That's wild.
1990. But in Japan, certain people had satellites that could receive pictures in HD quality or the perception of HD at a time. And this was the first event that had HD imaging in Japan.
That's why you're helium. That's why you're the best.
That's incredible stuff. So yeah, that's Italia '90. I'm sure there's loads more stuff I would have to say about it. When David O'Leary scored that penalty against Romania, I lost my fucking mind that day, and my dad, I think, went on like a 2-day bender as a result of that as well. In there, but yes, that wasn't the only bit of sport that happened in June of 1990 because we have the return of a certain Mike Tyson, who is in his first post Buster Douglas fight. Here, this is he had lost to him in Tokyo in the Tokyo Dome. What happened the day before at the Tokyo Dome, which I think it drew about 40,000 there, but what outdrew it at the Tokyo Dome the day before?
Hogan, brother.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, and Vader. I would always think Vader was like a massive draw for that. That's when he gets his eye knocked out against Stan Hansen because he's in the crowd for this fight as well. But yeah, instead, Mike, he returns to the ring against Olympic gold medalist Henry Tillman, who had previously defeated him twice in the amateurs. I had no recollection of this fight or Henry Tillman whatsoever. No. On the undercard of this, we have George Foreman, who's very much like still
big t-shirt on Tyson there, though, lads.
Still around, defeating Adelson Rodriguez there as well. I mean, was this is tying back into the Sky conversation?
Yeah.
We're seeing Sky's boxing coverage here for video viewers. I'm assuming on the Patreon because copyright strikes are plenty, I'd imagine, for this one as well. Do you any recollection of this fight? Your dad would have recollections of this one, wouldn't he, Liam?
Yeah, this was the second Tyson fight that Sky broadcast, obviously live. Obviously, the first one being the Buster Douglas fight. Yeah, I mean, even myself, a few years on, Tyson was always box office, wasn't he? You know, whoever he fought, he was that fighter. He could fight me and sell pay-per-views. You know what I mean? But yeah, this was his comeback fight. Initially, he wanted to go straight into a rematch with Buster Douglas. But Buster Douglas took more money to fight Evander Holyfield. There was a lot of rumours at the time that Mike Tyson would fight Thomas Hearns, which didn't come off, thankfully. Thomas Hearns, lot lighter of a fighter than Mike Tyson. So this fight was set up for Tyson to get back on track with the idea of the rematch with Buster Douglas to come later in the year. As we all know, Buster Douglas lost his title to Holyfield. Tyson then moved on to fight Holyfield after fighting Donovan Ruddock twice. He got injured in the build-up to the Holyfield fight, and then that fight was postponed for the initial time he was going to fight Holyfield. And then after that, his legal problems come up, and he got sent to prison. So we didn't see Mike Tyson in the ring again until 1996. basically everything that this fight was set up to be, a bit of a knockover job for Tyson to kind of get his confidence back more so than anything and lead towards another fight. As you mentioned, George Foreman had begun his comeback a few years earlier, and it wouldn't be till 1995 that he would get that world title again when he beat Michael Moorer. But it's a good little aside. As you saw there, Evander Holyfield's on commentary for this fight as well, so you can see the seeds are being planted for that fight to go ahead at some point down the road. But yeah, can't underestimate how big Mike Tyson was as a sports guy. I don't think in my lifetime that there's been a boxer that's crossed over. No, to be fair, I think Mayweather has run him close. But yeah, even to this day, I mean, you just need to see that joke of a fight he had with Jake Paul.
Yeah.
And how much that sold on the strength of it was Mike Tyson, is how much of a star he was at the time. Always to me, and just an aside, always to me, a very overrated heavyweight. Never rated him as one of the better heavyweights. I think we've had this discussion before. I would rank Lennox Lewis above him as a heavyweight on resume alone. But yeah, just as a point in time, 1990, we started this episode talking about Sky and its influence in society. Sky went straight out there. They knew they had to make a splash with programming, and they got Mike Tyson fights. And as I said, it really was a catalyst for me getting Sky at the time as well, because, as I said, Mike Tyson fights was much CTV at that point, and this is just another one of his fights.
Was the knock-on effect of Sky going for Tyson that ITV, which had always, to me, up to that point, been like the home of boxing and a lot of like sort of boxing big fights, it seemed to focus around what was that cracking, very much UK and Ireland based super middleweight division. Previously to that, I can remember watching, I'm sure they had Hearns and Hagler and stuff like that. They had access to those.
Yeah.
So it felt like they were like, well, actually, this is what we're going to focus on. And then they were lucky that, I mean, they had a Nigel Benn and a Chris Eubank and a Steve Collins and a Michael Watson and all of these other like kind of like very much big, iconic / notorious fights they had in there in the meantime.
I think you can see where both sides kind of lent in terms of Sky and terrestrial television at the time. Obviously, these fights at the time when they were on Sky Movies, as I mentioned earlier, so they were behind a paywall. So Sky knew how big a star Tyson was, and that would increase subscriptions to Sky Movies to watch the Tyson fight. But then you've also got to put into perspective that these fights were not starting till 4 a.m. in the morning. Now, for a commercial channel like ITV, selling advertisements at 4 a.m. in the morning is a lot harder of a task than showing a Chris Eubank versus Nigel Benn fight at prime time on a Saturday evening. So they could have seen it as, okay, we're not going to pay as much as Sky are going for these Tyson fights, but if we can guarantee we keep hold of the British fights on prime time on Saturday, that would suit us better. And a lot has been said and a lot has been written about that era of super middleweights in the UK with Nigel Benn, Eubank, Michael Watson, Steve Collins, as we spoke about in the last episode. But on a world scale, that was very much localized. That whole group of fighters would fight in England, would stay in England, and would fight each other. So in the wider world, while boxing people in America and other countries would know about these fighters, in America at the same time, they had their own bunch of super middleweights. They had Roy Jones, they had James Toney, they had Bernard Hopkins, they had Mike McCallum. They had their own super middleweights that they were perceived as these are the best. And the way ITV kind of cultivated Benn and Eubank and their feud and their rivalry at the time guaranteed that they were appealing to the people who would watch ITV on a Saturday night. As weird as it may sound, as we live in a generation now where everything's available at the click of a button, it was a lot easier to persuade people to watch a guy from Brighton fight a guy from London on a Saturday night than it was to watch a guy from Brighton fight somebody from Texas or so at 4 a.m. So I think for both people, it served its purpose. And I think also Sky having the boxing in tandem with the WWF at the time as well, kind of had two of the hotter properties that people wanted to see and people were curious about at that time and were willing to pay for behind the paywall.
It's yeah. I mean, I think that's I think that localized promotion is something that Sky do today. Dare I say it? I think they should do it with wrestling. Like,
well, on a lesser degree, you look at the way their cricket rights are done now as well. They have all the home test matches. The Ashes happens in England, Sky will show it. But the Ashes happens in Australia and starts at 1 a.m. It's on TNT Sports.
Yeah.
Sky know what their subscription base wants, and they see a lot higher of a value in sports that are on at a prime time that they can sell advertisements to than a sport that's in the middle of the night.
Yeah, they do. And just as a final side, before we wrap up on sport, it's amazing that Henry Tillman, and for those of you who are able to see this and hopefully seeing it on Patreon as well,
what a punch.
Like an Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah.
And he really comes across as someone here who is no different from the myriad of guys that Tyson would knock out when he was kind of like in his pomp. He looks like he's like just, you could even see him around the ring. He didn't even seem to have his guard up. He just seemed to be like all over the place. How comes he wasn't like a bigger name? He just didn't connect when it came to actually being a professional boxer.
Yeah, he didn't really have much fights after this either. He very much had this Tyson fight and then drifted away. He drifted away as a fighter. It's one of them. There's always this perception that you're a really good amateur, you're going to be a really good pro, and a lot of people don't necessarily transfer from the Olympics to the professional. And then, all the trappings that come with becoming a professional boxer as well, the big contracts, the money, the fame, and that a lot of people slip up on the basis of that as well. I think Tillman, made his money somewhat, had this fight with Tyson. And, I think, and there's also something to be said about a very long amateur career as well. People underestimate that with fighters, that they look at their professional career as their career. Whereas a lot of fighters have had a lot of fights in the amateurs. And it's not only the wear and tear of being in fights that take its toll. It's constantly training, constantly dieting, constantly being fit. And for some fighters, they kind of just get to an end point when it's like, this is not what I want to do anymore, or my body no longer responds to what I used to do to strive at this level. And there's been many fighters over the year, like we were saying before we come on air, Andre Ward is the last American gold medalist from the Olympics. So it's not always that transition over from the amateurs to the professional game as it once was.
Oh, thank you for that. That's the life and times of Henry Tillman. We hardly knew you, mate, as well. And it was nice to see a young Glenn McCrory, who you speak about someone who got out. I always got the impression of Glenn McCrory, he recognised there was more longevity if he just became a pundit / commentator. Yeah, and that's the route he'd go down. He was never going to be a big deal as a professional. Get yourself into that, and it worked out all right for him in the end. So that is the end of sport, which then leads us nicely, and this is the bit where I've got to make sure I get all the various things ready, because we're going to move over to films.
Yes,
and that's Matty. So I'll put up the music, mate.
We getting Baz Norman ready to go, JP?
Oh, as always, that's the way we have to do it. So yeah, you're going to tell us about what was in the box office for the 1st of June 1990.
Of course. Now I will start off with number. Are we this in post edit, James? Oh, here we go. Coming in at number 10 is A Nightmare on Elm Street 5. The Dream Child. Number 9, Shooting Stars. At number 8, She-Devil. Number 7, it's The Craze. Number 6, The Hunt for Red October. Number 5, Nuns on the Run. Number 4, It's Hard to Kill. Number 3, Harlem Nights. Number 2, The Witches. And at number 1, on the 1st of June to the 3rd of June 1990, in your cinemas, and rightfully so, was Pretty Woman. Now, we've got to start at the top here, guys. We always say, Gareth, does he believe in a guilty pleasure? I mean, this is one of my guilty pleasure movies, JP. Gear, Roberts. What else do you want here, mate? I love Pretty Woman. I may be alone in this, lads, but I think it's for what it is, JP, for obviously a rom-com, whatever you want to genre-lize it. Is that a word?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the best ones for me of all time. Pretty Woman, absolutely love it, mate. And it's going to tie in to another top 10 that Liam's going to do in a bit as well with the theme song. But overall, GP, I'm guessing you're not going to be a fan, but can you see why people like it? Can you see why it was popular in the cinemas in 1990 itself?
Yeah. I mean, this is when you're getting into the sort of time and place aspect of this. Part of the thing that Pretty Woman always, like, Gear was a star. There wasn't this idea of people looking at the plot and going, hang on a minute, she's a prostitute, he's hiring her, and then effectively they fall in love. And the people weren't doing that kind of questioning of it. They just let that shit slide. They just wanted to watch like a rom-com, and it was just like a simple setup. Julia Roberts, which I'll always maintain this, particularly with like, you know, Erin Brockovich being the kind of, I look at like almost like the peak of it, an incredibly engaging star. I generally think she's always been really good anyway at the best of times. I can understand why this is a hit, but it's like Dirty Dancing. It's not for me. It's not aimed at me. I am not the target audience, but I was made to watch this by my sister.
That was what my question was. Forget Brett or Sean, Liam. Are you Pretty Woman or you Dirty Dancer, me? Because I'm Pretty Woman all the way, because I think it's the Brett. I think it's the Brett.
That is a hard question. I think I'm Pretty Woman. I've always liked Julia Roberts. I think this is a big star-making performance. Is that right, JP?
Yeah, she looks fantastic as well in this. She's just a star.
Still Magnolias before this, which is very much
Mystic Pizza as well, JP.
Yeah, Mystic Pizza as well.
Yeah.
But
they weren't this. This was a phenomenon at the time.
Let's not undersell how good Richard Gere looks here as well.
He's just
absolute
he's
star.
From Officer and the Gentleman, which he had, he looked incredible in that like 8 or 9 years earlier, maybe even a decade, and he comes back looking like this, Liam, like a fine whiskey.
Oh yeah, great. I mean, a proper like housewife.
Still Fox.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have no problems with this film. I watched the trailer again. I remember it well last time I seen it. I like it. I think it's a good film. I think it's a really good film. And as you say, for that genre of film, there's very seldom anything that I feel is better than it. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's well written. It doesn't overstay its welcome. And the two leads are very good in their roles. And obviously the soundtrack is top drawer as well, Matthew.
But also, lads, there's an absolutely one of the most heelish performances of all time by a George Costanza / Jason Alexander. Yep. He's such a heel in this, but it's obviously he turns up in this, doesn't he, as well? But it is. It's just honestly, it's one of my guilty pleasures, and I'll probably watch it at least once a year, lads, genuinely. So honestly, I love it.
Just to mention on this film, then, is this was Runaway Bride when DX got back together? Is that the 2000s DX?
Yeah,
it
is.
Nobody asked for it. Nobody asked for it.
Nobody did, though.
You could see a couple of coin could be made from it, and then it was like, oh, we're going to try this, but I don't think anybody wanted it at the time, and I don't necessarily think it's that bad a movie as well either. Runaway Bride, again, for what it is, but just ridiculous. When I was doing my research about this with Pretty Woman, is that at the time of release, it was the 5th highest grossing film of all time. That's how popular. That's how popular it was, and I think it very much did in cinema at that point appeal to. And JP can correct me here, but I think it may have appealed to a section of society that weren't necessarily going to cinema, weren't necessarily having films that were catering towards what they wanted to see, sort of thing. And that stood there.
This is the thing about this. I mean, this came out in March in the States. The only other film I could think of that was as big that year, or something that would be close to it, would be Ghost.
Yeah.
Like, again, something that crosses that, like, it was very much a date film, like the epitome of a date film. And you got to remember as well, the rom-com genre itself isn't the fully fledged kind of
what it becomes, JP.
What it
becomes so like, so stale, doesn't it?
Subgenres get created because people get bored of genres. And at this stage, it was just like, okay, we're gonna put together like effectively what is a rom-com for the most part, but they're just making sure that you can sympathize with the Julia Roberts character, which she does.
Can I give the numbers out here? Because like, this is like in an era now where if you're making like, you know, your superhero ones, you know, I think we're in the past with that now, aren't we? But they were your guaranteed money making exercise. But lads, this is 1990 money, right? Budget of 14 million. The whole box office total 463.4 million. That's genuinely remarkable. That like, honest to God,
probably the guts 2 billion.
It easily, JP, inflation. You've got to go and pay. You're going there, as you say, that date movie. The longevity, I say, months on end, being number one still here in June as we're talking. Like, it can't. And there's a lot of films back then, like, honestly, that like hit them. I think like Fatal Attraction's another one of my favorites. That grossed like 400, 500 million. It just had that appeal at the time. And it's remarkable to see a film like that, because nowadays you wouldn't get, really, would you? Even like a rom-com with decent stars wouldn't even make that much money, JP. Nowhere near it.
Oh God, no. Like a lot of the times, and I think it's just because audiences look at it and go, well, we've kind of seen everything.
Yeah.
At this point, we've seen everything for like where this can go. And we know like there's no surprises anymore at this stage. The stuff that does well these days is primarily family films. Like the big film of the summer might end up just being Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah.
And that's a remake of that. And it's partly because they're tapping into a particular, that audience who watched it as kids, which wasn't me, they're now nostalgic for it and have kids of their own. Yeah. And so that's how that ends up coming about. So yeah, it's not really a surprise at this stage, but it's very rarely, it's not like big action films and stuff like that these days that is the stuff that dominates the box office. It tends to be more family based. Well,
JP, it got a giggle out of me. I was going through the top 10. I don't know, I got a smile on your face, but Nuns on the Run. I mean, this is one that always like taking me back to the time and when it actually debuted on terrestrial. It was always advertised on like, and I've never sat down and watched it though. Lads, is it any good? And I'm a big fan of Coltrane. I love Crackhead and love some of the other stuff. Is Turning Blackadder's amazing as well. But yeah, I mean, have you seen it, JP?
Do you not remember? It's Spectacle, Testicles, Wallet and Watch.
Wallet and Watch,
No. That's how they remember to do the sign of the cross. that stuck with me. I mean, it was a big film. Made by Handmade Films as well. Behind that was George Harrison's production company and Time Bandits, Monty Python films, things like that. So getting in Eric Idle, and it did well. Like, I don't ever think there was a sequel to it, but I remember this being a thing. Certainly my parents would have just been like, yeah, we're going to watch this. Like, because it's easy entertainment, which has got some vaguely risque moments. And they come up in the trailer as well. In there, although they make it very clear that their job is to coach 18 to 22-year-olds at a college for sport. And you're just like, all right, okay, this could get deeply problematic with two lads who are in their like late 40s at this point in there.
I'm gonna have to Google Coltrane's age there, JP. Sorry.
You're gonna tell me he's like 29 or something. But I remember seeing it. I remember seeing this several times. This was like a kind of video shop staple.
Yeah.
You'd be getting out 3 films, and there'd be like one for me, one really for my sister, and one for like the parents, and that'd be it. And it'd be like, okay. And this is the one that the parents, it would tick the box, but we'd be allowed to watch it because it wouldn't really be very rude. And they were familiar faces. Like my dad was weirdly a big Monty Python fan, so he'd be like all over Eric Idle in there as well. So yeah.
What was Coltrane known for before this then, JP? Was he just a comic?
He was just a comic.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
That's how I was thought pre-crack. When is Cracker?
Cracker's like 93, isn't he? Something like
Yeah.
that.
Is
94.
he? I might be wrong with this. Isn't he in Mona Lisa with Bob Hoskins? Do I imagine that, or is he in that for a bit?
Without checking, that
Yeah.
sounds kind of plausible for that to be the case.
Yeah.
But he wasn't doing a lot of dramatic roles. He'd be doing, because there'd be so much various, like not the 9 o'clock news and stuff like that. He was in with that group of comics, so he'd be doing like comic stuff at that point in time as well. And again, like a very familiar face on TV. Sure. Yellow did the music. Jonathan Lynn directed it. Went on to do a lot of stuff in Hollywood as well at that point in time. But yeah, I mean, it would have done well in the States. It's very much aimed at a British market, but that's fine.
I mean, we're going to end on the main event, obviously, at the movies, and I think we all know what that's going to be. Excuse me, but we've got to obviously mention, while he's still here, still somewhat of a semi-draw, we've got to mention Freddie sneaking in at number 10, lads. Nightmare on Elm Street 5. I mean, we're past there. I mean, this is very much comedic Freddie at this point, Liam. If memory serves me correct, I haven't seen them for a while. Got the box set on Blu-ray, of course, like we all should own, lads. But this is full on. The kills are funny. You know, he's very much like half your baby face. They're presenting the kids as like a bit who you want to see kill, JP, as they do with that. Very much the draw to see these films at this point, isn't it, Freddie? But
they give him a vaguely sympathetic backstory, don't they?
Yeah.
This is very much like the implausibility, even in the state of modern prisons and whatnot, that a child could live in a prison cell alongside a load of like absolute fucking maniacs. Like that wouldn't happen. Like that is, for me, that just reminds me of Brasseye talking about ejecting paedophiles into space, and then somehow a 7-year-old boy gets locked on board with them by accident. It's just like, what is the chain of events that kind of lead to that? But this one, I have no recollection of this film. Like, even when I watched the trailer, I was like, there's a couple of bits I could kind of remember, but for the most part, it was just like it's Freddie doing his lines, isn't it? It's very much like it is really properly going through the motions.
This is it's like in the video viewers there, like Freddie and a chef at Liam. Like, this is what it's come to, hasn't it? It's very much leaning in on that.
It's very much it's a bit nudge nudge wink wink, isn't it, this Freddie?
Talking to the camera, Freddie, isn't it? Definitely, yeah.
At this point. But yeah, I always remember this film as it's got Iron Maiden on, hasn't it, as a soundtrack, Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughters, like the theme tune to it. Yeah. I always remember that. But as this is an episode of time, I just want to point out the differences in 1990 to this day and age. Nightmare on Elm Street 5 was released in America on August the 8th, 1989. It was then released in the UK on the 11th of May. So 8-9 months it took for the difference between release between the US and the UK at that point.
Unbelievable, really, isn't it? I mean, we'll talk about it. Yeah, that was just the way it was. We'll leave, because we'll save it for after we've discussed the films, about like the other section of movies we're going to talk about in a minute, because that blew my mind. You think like under a year is a long time to wait. Till we go into this in a minute. But it's the end of the before we get into the main event coming at number 4, lads. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Like, name a couple that jump out to me. Craze, I haven't seen for a long time, and The Hunt for Red October, I don't think I've ever seen. They're the two
wow.
To me, I know, Liam, I've let myself down there, mate. But anything else you guys want to talk about, or them?
JP?
I've got just brief overviews of a few of these things. I don't want to step on any toes or go through them, but I mean, Hunt for Red October was a film I remember we tried to watch, and I just couldn't get into it. It just wasn't really for me. It wasn't really a whole lot of action per se. It's like submarine films are limited by the fact you're on fucking submarines. Like, it does limit the action quite a bit. The Craze, on the other hand, that was a video shop staple. Yeah. And I've got fond memories of it, much more so than the Tom Hardy film
Legend.
Did, which I was just like, well, I kind of know this story. And it's probably the surprise that the Kemps are as good as they are, because this would have been probably their acting debut in there as well. And it didn't shy away from the fact that, like, Ronnie Cray was gay. It didn't, which in 1990 wasn't a thing that you know, you would see in certain mainstream films. It was nasty. The Chelsea smile and stuff like that, it really like sticks with you as well. And it was, and we weren't that, they were alive at that point in time.
Yeah.
We weren't that far removed from the era of the craze, and it was a film that kind of like, even though I mean, I don't think it did particularly well in this. I don't know if it would have done particularly well in the States just because of the subject matter, but in the UK, it was a big deal, and it would have done really good business in terms of the video shop, because it'd be the kind of thing you could imagine going in and just people casually going, yeah, we'll get that out. That looks all right. And I've got fond memories of it, even though I probably haven't seen it since about 1992.
Other films before we go on to it, like I have Shooting Stars, She Devil, The Witches, Harlem Nights. They don't jump out to me at all. And there, JP?
Shooting Stars, I know the whole film is on YouTube.
Yeah,
there's something about Manchester City. Liam, have you seen that before? I've never heard of this.
I had never heard of it, and to find out anything about it was pretty difficult to find out. From what I can gather about it, it's about a Manchester City footballer who gets caught up in a kidnapping plot. And I don't know if it was because of the strength of it being a British film at the time that it managed to crack the top 10 in terms of the box office for this week. But yeah, until I saw it on this list, I had no knowledge of it whatsoever. It is directed by a guy called Chris Bernard, if anybody's familiar with it, who's probably his biggest film is Letter to Brezhnev. That was always one of those films. Yeah, one of those films that I always remember was one I never wanted to see, but it was always a film that was like in the video shop that wasn't for mine. But yeah, beforehand, I knew nothing of that. He seemed to have done a few things afterwards. He wrote episodes of Brookside, and he also did, I don't know if anybody remembers, My Parents Are Aliens, which was a TV which was on CITV.
Yeah,
and it's one of these shows that's like after its time is very much now seen in a different light, and people are saying how ahead of its time it was and how beyond a kid's show. We spoke about, I think in the first episode of Time, Adventures of Pete and Pete, which after its time as a kid's show just basically like steamrolled into something of a bit of a cult classic, and My Parents Are Aliens is very similar to that as well. So that's the background of that Shooting Stars. But yeah, as I said before, doing this list, I knew nothing of this film whatsoever.
For the other films that are outside of the number 4 that I know you want to get to at the very end, She Devil, I can remember it coming out because it was effectively it was a film version of what was a kind of popular British TV show, Lives and Loves of a She Devil.
Yeah, it was a book. Faye Weldon.
Faye Weldon, that's it.
From Birmingham.
Yeah, there was and this one, it just looked terrible when I watched the trailer for it with Meryl Streep and Roseanne Barr in there. Harlem Nights, I can remember it, but the last time I remember seeing anything about it was when I watched the Richard Pryor documentary that was on show. So was it Omit the Logic? And they're speaking about it, and it's Pryor's in a bad place at that stage. He's very unwell. I think it's the MS that he has is really kind of like kicking in. So, and it's Eddie Murphy, not really like it's a flop.
Is it his directorial debut? I think it is. I think it's Eddie Murphy's directorial debut, and it's a bit of a
it's like a mess.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like, I want to work with Pryor sort of thing. Yeah. And it was all very much stemmed around that. And I'm a massive Eddie Murphy fan from that era as well. Like late 80s, early 90s. But then this seems to be this seems to be the one that kind of breaks up his run. And then what we got? Boomerang, and then like what's the vampire one? Interview with a Vampire, is it? Is that?
I think
with Eddie Murphy.
We've also got Beverly Hills Cop 3.
Vampire in Brooklyn.
And Brooklyn, that's it. Yeah,
Vampire in Brooklyn. Yeah, it goes to that era where up until about Nutty Professor, he's very much like just simmering under, isn't he? And not that star that he once was.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was particularly in Beverly Hills Cop 3, which was just like making Beverly Hills Cop 3, making a film for kids. It's like, why? They're not going to see this. The Witches, just very briefly to mention, like that. I did see much later on because I saw that actually with my kids, directed by Nick Rogue, who did Don't Look Now, and it had some very sort of creepy makeup. Like, again, did well enough that they did a remake of it as well with Anne Hathaway and the Angelica Houston role in it, and it's Roald Dahl, so there's a kind of everlasting kind of like as IP goes, it's always going to kind of have that appeal as well at the same time. So not surprised to see it up there in and around number 2, but all of it pales into insignificance to the number 4, Matty, that I know you really want to talk about.
I mean, I know I'm high on the number 1, Pretty One, but this should be number 1 in this list for me, lads. Like, we're finally getting around to it, Liam. We're getting around to Seagal's IWC debut run, though. His first 5 movies. Like, people on this Grapple network would have heard me wax lyrical for years about this. Honestly, though, lads, like, he's a bit of a forgotten man when it comes to his movies. I know it's always Arnie, isn't it? And Stallone and Van Damme. But these first 5 films, JP, up until the first Under Siege, like, honestly, I'm not going to say they're the greatest movies you're ever going to watch, but they're like,
I'm glad you're not.
For the genre and for what they are, JP, they're fucking brilliant. They're so easy. What you look at this, William Sadler as a heel as well. Fucking always got a lot of time for him. Like, unbelievable. But this, and once again, this isn't even like my favorite one of these movies, but this is just like, throw it on any time, lads. You'll have a great time. You'll have a laugh.
Good clothesline.
No, but JP, Seagal, like I'll always say as well, out of all the action stars, he would just refuse to sell. You never even see him get a dig. He never takes anything, JP. Seriously, in any one of his films. It's amazing. And that's why I love him at that run. Honestly, like, he can't act. He's wooden as anything. But just give me these first 5 films and inject them into my veins, lads. Seriously, just... And it's hard to kill. I haven't even mentioned which one it is at number 4. Yeah. But it's hard to kill after that big build-up. Just... Where'd you stand, though, Liam? Are you with me in some regards with this... Seagal love, or are you totally against them, mate?
Oh, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I am a firm Mark for Death number 1, man.
Me and you. That's why I love you. The best, Liam. Screwface, the best. Mark
for Death number 1. But yeah, like you say, these first 5 are just great. I actually sat and watched this when I was doing the list, and I was like, I'm going to watch this again, sort of thing.
I need to watch it again.
Great showing by Kelly LeBrock as well. Always got time for
always
Kelly LeBrock in these films. Always got time for Kelly LeBrock. They were married at this point as well.
I was going to say, married.
Were married, but yeah, it's a film that I would call chicken soup film. That there's no surprises. You know exactly what you're getting with it. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's comfortable. It's like an old pair of slippers, isn't it, Matthew? You put them on, and you think to yourself, "This is what I remember. This is what I need." But yeah, won't hear anything bad about this film. People go, "Oh, he can't act. It's all very stilted and that." Yes, and that's half the charm of it.
That's part of it. That genuinely is. Yeah.
It's such half the charm. So yeah, Mason Storm.
What a name!
Has always got a part in my heart with this. But yeah, absolutely love this.
But I love it as well, Lee, because if you tell Seagal that he just won $20 million on the lottery, or you just tell him his dad had died, he'd have the same reaction on his face, wouldn't he?
Oh, yeah.
That's why I love it. Not moves on his face. I absolutely love it, but it is what a name. And he was doing like numbers at the box office once again, like 11 million budget, but he's making what, 6 or 7 times back at 75 million. So, and this is only his second movie as well. You know, after Above the Law's debut, isn't it? And then you get Hard to Kill, you get Mark for Death, Out for Justice, and then he gets his big push when he gets like a big. I know William Sadler's in this, but you're getting a Tommy Lee Jones and a Gary Busey as like as a sidekick heel there, and his big budget one of Under Siege, which that's his peak. Then he has moments after that. Don't get me wrong, but the consistency's gone then for sure with Seagal. But as I say, these 5 unreal.
He fucks it with On Deadly Ground.
Oh yeah. Is there anybody? Probably Jean-Claude Van Damme is probably the only. But does anybody epitomise video shops as much as Steven Seagal does? Is that you know when you think of a video shop, you think of certain actors that were omnipresent in video shops when you would go to rent a movie. Seagal, Van Damme, I think are like both top of the tree. They just had this constant like production line of films that. If you went into a video shop every month, there would be a new Seagal film for you to watch, sort of thing.
Exit Wounds, Liam. Exit wounds, though,
yeah.
quality. That
Exit
was on the
Wounds.
video shop like wall for like 3 years. It seemed when I was going in when at the bottom of my nan's road in like late 90s, early 2000s. That was just not moving at all.
Half past in with a jar rule.
But you know what that was, Liam? That was honestly, you know, when people say like, I know we're in a different frame. That's about 2000 and maybe 8 or 9. Is it? Is it that late or maybe a bit earlier?
Yeah.
But that was like, no, seriously, that was like one of the first ones of like straight to Blu-ray. It was made straight, like it was always seen as like a slight, and a film flopped in the box office and went to straight to like in the basement bin or whatever. This was actually made for that, and these actors got money off that at the time because like some of them like Danny Trejo films were made like that, and that's how they get the following. Underrated.
Oh, it's absolutely.
Like
it's you know, it becomes the model of, you know, we're no longer going to be able to sell 100,000 DVDs for £15 a pop. Let's sell 200,000 DVDs at £5 a pop in Londis. That's
But I've got there's a set there, and you probably got it yourself. This is Van Damme, and it's the run in like the early 2000s, like the one with Lawrence Taylor's in there, the film.
Yeah.
And it's a box set of like 6 films from that era. And like, as you say, they were selling them like 6 movies for like £10, like just getting your money worth. Or we'll watch, and they're probably all like terrible except for that one with Lawrence Taylor's fucking brilliant. I love that one. Fucking love it. But yeah, always got time for Seagal, and obviously just his early run is 5 movies and a few other gems after that. Here, give or take. So we've actually concluded movies, and we've talked about all 10, which I like there, guys. So I'm going to hand the baton.
We've not.
Go on. Sorry. On the top 10, we have. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Talk about, of course. Sorry, we've jumping ahead of the gun there. We finished the top 10, and we're going to talk about a show that was a movie drone. Like this was, I'd never heard of this one, lads. I'd absolutely never heard of it.
Oh.
And it seemed like, reading off the synopsis here, it was a TV show that broadcast a selection of cult films on a Sunday evening, preceded by an introduction of each film by host, film director Alex Cox, and then later film critic Mark Cousins. Movie Drone started in May 1988, and it ran until July 2000, and it showed 207 different movies within the BBC archives. Most had yet to be aired at the time of broadcast. Now, nothing can speak louder than that last bit there, because the movie that it put on TV in June 1990 was a movie that come out 6 years earlier. So this was getting his British TV network debut, lads. Not 6 months, 6 fucking years later. That's how long we had to wait to see Arnie in the role he was born to play in the Terminator, lads. Like, wild. But like, JP, any fond memories of the show Movie Drone itself?
Absolutely. This is tying into, and this is the thing about this particular period of time, 1990, where I was buying a lot of film magazines. So I was buying Empire like regularly, started to really get into it, to the point where I was traveling into the West End to buy old issues of Empire from like the late 80s and stuff like that, which my mum then threw away, which I could have, like, again, I kept them in decent nick as well. But what this was on a Sunday night. It'd be late night as well. And so, because I was in secondary school, I'd be able to stay up that little bit later as well. I had a TV in the room. And it was a lot of cult films. Now, clearly they did the Terminator because it was a big film. And he talks about the production of Terminator 2 at this point in time, which is an incredible film and better than the original, because it doesn't have those limitations. And it does the face turn perfectly. But this was Alex Cox. It was like, this was with him, and then with Mark Cousins, who then himself became a film director. He was like the effectively the programmer for the Edinburgh Film Festival was Mark Cousins. But this was stuff like, I'm wearing a Blue Velvet t-shirt. Blue Velvet would be part of this. David Lynch films would be part of this. Alex Cox had directed Repo Man. With Emilio Estevez, and I'm trying to think of who the other actor is. Harry Dean Stanton. Harry Dean Stanton. He also directed Sid and Nancy, which had Gary Oldman as Sid Vicious, telling the story of the Sex Pistols. And he was he was kind of like an auteur, but he was like a film critic. This is very much of the like people writing for Sight and Sound and the more high end film magazines that I was just starting to get into as much as anything. And watching stuff like this was stuff that like really like stuck with me, because it was like, okay, this is really interesting stuff. The fact that if you want more information, you then got to send a check or a postal order to a PO box in order to get it back. £2.75 wouldn't have been that cheap as well. But the thing about it that's really interesting is that this was like where BBC Two kind of found like a bit of a niche, and Channel 4 ended up doing this as well. And I used to love those little like introductions. Mark Como did them for a while as well. They were like you had proper film critics and cinema fans who were introducing films that wouldn't be seen normally on British TV. And they were interesting and they were weird, and sometimes they weren't good. Like, but they were showing films like by Jodorowsky and stuff like that, like Holy Mountain and stuff, like mad films. And it was fun. So it's a really big influence on me in terms of me getting into films.
I
yourself, Liam?
Vaguely remember the back end of this, but I've read a lot about it over the years, and it almost became a thing that 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, BBC Two was showing a movie you kind of had to watch if you were a fan of cinema, sort of thing, and you were exposed to stuff that you were. I think I remember watching, I think it was Dazed and Confused, a lot younger than I should have been to be watching it, and I remember seeing that on a Sunday night.
Incredible film.
Just that book ending of somebody, explaining what the film is, where the film comes from, the concept, and then just like a brief conclusion at the end as well. There was nothing kind of like that on TV at the moment. And, it was treating cinema as art. We all talk about like superhero movies and all that. And, some people can look down their nose and go, it's this and this. And people don't see it as a valid form of art. But like, there was a point in time, especially growing up, BBC Two was the channel that showed arts. That was the stuff that, if you liked things a little bit more than the surface level, it would be on BBC Two for the most part. And so that did appeal to me a lot later on in this run, sort of thing. But just having this in the vaults, the BBC, I suppose it goes back to what we were saying about video shop culture and that, and the amount of money Terminator must have made on video in terms of rentals and stuff. That it was kind of one of those that they possibly wanted to keep out as a rental video as long as they could to, recoup costs and whatnot. But if you're watching that clip that we just saw, and it's a 15, and the way it's presented, it's like going to be the most horrific film you've ever watched in your life. Whereas now you see Terminator, and do you think of Terminator as being this, squeamish, like video nasty that had to wait so long to get a terrestrial area? You don't, and I think that's just speaks echoes of the time and how things have moved on in terms of how things were perceived and how things are perceived now. And films like Terminator, which at the time I would say was a niche film on release, but if that was to come out now, it would be seen by everybody that would have wanted to see it 12 months after its release date. And something like this was still a big event so long after it was, that people were like, Terminator's on BBC. What an event it is. It's just, it is such a difference in terms of where we are in the modern age.
And anything in art house cinema would be, if it was BBC, it'd be shunted to BBC 4 immediately. So immediately it's not as accessible and it's not as obvious to pick up on. Or these days it'd end up on like a movie, and it'd end up on the really niche film streaming platforms that don't, unless you're a proper like cinephile, you're not going to be subscribing to it. So although I've still got a Mubi account that's been going for 5 years because of a previous job. So what's the substance on there? Like,
love it, JP. Love that, mate.
But that's it. Just to finish on this, that's it in terms of how choices have expanded so much to where we are now. Is that stuff like this becomes so fragmented? So a film like, say, a film like the Terminator could sit on Mubi in terms of release, and eventually people who want to see the film will be exposed to it. But that crossover to the wider world It's not necessarily going to be there. I mean, when's the last time you sat down to watch a film on terrestrial television and gone, I know nothing about this. I've never seen it. You don't, do you? Because
never again.
You're
happen again.
You're aware of films, and if they pique your interest on release, you will go and find it. Rarely are you there sitting there seeing something. You know, how many films did we watch after falling asleep during the last 20 minutes of Match of the Day, and you woke up and Judgment Night is starting or Trespass is starting, and you know nothing about the film, but you'll sit and spend 2 hours and watch it. I just don't think that exists anymore in terms of exposure for stuff that might not necessarily know of, or you might not necessarily go out your way to watch, but it's there.
I always say about that as well. It's a proper double-sided coin, double-edged sword, however you want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
We've got it so good now. Like, it's incredible when you really think about it. Like we talk, we can watch anything straight away. We can listen to anything straight away. We don't have to leave our house to do it. But at the same time, it's the worst as well for me, because nothing gets built up, like you're saying, Daily. Nothing's got that aura. Nothing's got that, like, protection of, like, oh, you might have to see that. It's a bit gory, or it's done. You might have it for, like, 10 seconds. You might text me saying, oh, Matty, have you seen that? Yeah, I'll go and watch it now. There's no build-up. There's no hype. There's no anticipation ever again. And I know it's lost, though, to me. I love that side of it, but at the same time, as I say, I'm happy and made up that I can get something so accessible. So it's a tough one. It really is for me. But anyway, that's me. Another rant down as one of the older brigades, JP, these days. But yeah, we do end on their movies there. And I'm going to pass the baton for the final lap to the man himself. Liam, are you going to take us away and take us home with music from June 1990, my friend?
So I'll get the music lined up.
I'm going to do a Chad Gable here and do double duty on the Killers. But yeah.
Here we go. And I'll hit the music now.
Here we go. Hold On by Wilson Phillips. Number 9, The Only One I Know, The Charlatans. 8, Venus, Don Pablo's Animals. Number 7, Doing the Do, It's Betty Boo. Number 6, It Must Have Been Love, Roxette. Number 5, double A side by Reg, Sacrifice and Healing Hands by Elton John. Number 4, Killer Adamski with Killer. Number 3, Hit a Drum to Get Wicked by Chad Jackson. And number 2, Step by Step, it's New Kids on the Block. And number 1, World in Motion, England and New Order. So there we go, top 10 for the 10th to the 16th of June. Anything jump out at anybody there? Got to start with the top one, World in Motion, England New Order. The greatest football song, or do we have any contenders for it?
I have a contender. I'm a Three Lions guy all day long. I'm Three Lions. This is definitely top 2 or 3, of course. More for, I don't know, like, I know Three Lions is iconic, but this is just, it's the iconic one, isn't it? But as a song, don't get me wrong, Three Lions 98, and then he's one after that, terrible. But 96, Three Lions, the original, the Go football song for me. But this is a cracker. And John Barnes' finest hour, JP, would you say?
Yeah, it would. This is, I mean, the only other one I can think of, and this is a niche one, it'd be an Irish one, Put 'Em Under Pressure, which uses some samples of Jack Charlton, and that's and that's quite good. But that is this is just genuinely a good New Order song that happened to feature the England team, primarily John Barnes. It was incredible, and this is also, we speak about Italia 90 earlier on, and I kind of didn't want to mention it, but this song was a massive help for it making it seem cool, because it was New Order. Like, it was a really big, credible band, really good song. I think, is it Keith Allen? Does he makes an appearance?
He turns up,
he turns up.
Vindaloo stuff as well. Keith Allen, he turns up later than a years later.
Yeah, everything has its bad points, doesn't it? But yeah.
Yeah.
So, Matty, not a fan of Dizzy Rascal and Jamie Corden?
No, I'm not.
Tears Fears.
No, definitely not.
But no, for me, this is the best of the major competition songs that England produced. As JP alluded to, there's an element of New Order doing the song, adds it such an air of credibility that I think not necessarily afterwards they had. I mean, okay, Ian Brody from the Lightning Seeds in some circles, that gives it a bit of credibility. But I think this, I mean, the iconic rap in it as well, the video, I think this is the benchmark that the others follow in terms of that. But the rest of the charts going through it, obviously, we're in a World Cup year, and the official song Nessun Dorma by Pavarotti hasn't entered the charts yet. I think it usually takes until the tournament is in full flow for it to resonate throughout the greater society in terms of a song. But anybody want to mention anything else that's on this chart?
I mean, yeah, of course. I'm going straight to number 6 here, lads. We talked about the movie earlier on, and to this day, if I'm making like a mixed playlist of different genres, then this song is definitely on there. It's Roxette, It Must Have Been Love, one of the greatest, I'd say, ballads. Like, I love it. Absolutely love this song. Great song. Roxette as well. I don't know in general, Liam. I know you're the Everton connoisseur, mate, but I think that I like Roxette. I think they're all right. I'm saying too much on this episode, but I actually like them. Would he phony though, Liam? Would he a bit Milli Vanilli? I heard that rumour that like the guy didn't play all the instruments. I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't know if that's true, but in terms of Roxette, yeah, massive fan. 1994 was the year. Crash Boom Bang, their album, was on my Christmas list. I will freely admit. Yeah, a lot of time for Roxette. I think this is actually a great song.
No, it is.
In all honesty, I mean, some of the charts we've done recently have a few, let's say, crap ballads, whereas I think this is very good. And in terms of a combination of song and movie, I don't think there's many that are as intertwined as this. You hear this song, you think Pretty Woman, you watch Pretty Woman, before this song plays, you hear it in your head, sort of thing. Yeah, massive song. And they're a massive band as well, weren't they?
Yeah.
I think if they were to come along today, I would really like done them as like, you know what I mean, as the like ballad rock for parents doing their weekly shop. But
yeah,
I think this is great, actually.
I think
this is like sort of what I would think of as your typical R price song.
Yeah,
like this is parents walking into Woolworths and I like that song, and they just pick it up, and it would hang around the charts all the time. I probably at the time, like so much stuff like this, I probably would have been sick of hearing it because it was around for a long time. But that doesn't make it bad. That's just an overexposure to a snarky near teenager. I also like the song they did from Mannequin as well, which I can't even think of the name of at this point in time, because I mean, but it fits it perfectly. It's like, this is just the kind of stuff that works, and it's like a precursor to your Bryan Adams and Everything I Do, your Celine Dion and that big song film tie-in stuff that you would have, particularly like kind of ballads as well, and even the videos, like they all seem to kind of like sort of somewhat resemble themselves. But yeah, this is a perfectly, like, I think, yeah, this is a really good ballad.
I've never been happier on a podcast, lads. I don't think I ever have. Well,
I just want to say, Chloe, you know, because of how big this was and how big Pretty Woman was, it could easily be stated that they are a bit of a one-hit wonder, but it's so far from the truth. You think of other songs that they did, you know, Dress for Success, big fan of that. The Look,
tune.
Listen to Your Heart, you know,
Joyride,
you know.
Fading Like a Flower, Liam, classic.
Yeah. A lot of good songs, but yeah, this is. I think I have softened to this over the years, because this is the kind of song when I first was going out and drinking that like would be on in the taxi at 2:30 at night while the taxi driver was driving me home. It is very much late night like calling
Smooth
radio
FM.
Yeah, very
Heart, Magic, all the classic stations.
Yeah, very much. But yeah, Absolutely love this song. JP, anything else you thought, jump out to you?
I couldn't quite catch you there, mate. I don't know what happened there. It sounded like you were in a submarine from Hunt for Red October there for a second.
Is that any better?
That is a lot better. Now I can hear you.
There we go. Anything else in the charts jump out to you?
I mean, there's a couple of there's songs that sort of like stick with me of like, oh my God, I remember that. Hear the Drummer Get Wicked is something that has survived the test of time, I feel.
See, this is going to be like last month, sorry, when I'm saying I don't know this, but the minute you guys play it, I'll know it, won't I?
You will.
Yeah.
You will absolutely know this. You will have heard this so many times.
Yeah.
It's just like the video doesn't quite fit the song, but it's incredibly catchy.
Okay.
See what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, fucking hell.
Right, Matty, I'm just going to make this easier for you. The theme from Street Mate.
Yeah. How many adverts though as well? Just every...
Again, this was a song when I was playing these to Vicky, and she was just like, she just started singing it. Like a couple of these, it was like, okay, yeah. And you just see how it survives the test of time. Like this is, I think it aged well. This tune.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those sampled songs that has been omnipresent. That it's, as you say, it's a song that you can't really pinpoint where you heard it or when you heard it, but it's a song that you definitely know you have heard at some point. But yeah,
can we? I mean, say similar to the movies, Liam. I'm sure you're keeping number 4 for the main event. I've got you down as a big fan of number 4 because I want to talk about it. But we've got to mention Double Reg as you give them the big build in the top 10. A little B-side from Reg turning up here because I mean I'm familiar with Sacrifice, but Healing Hand as well. I don't think I'm too familiar with that one. It was because Sacrifice was a number 1, wasn't it? Like he hadn't had, was that's a trivia note. He hasn't had number 1 for a long time, and then he come out with this. And once again, lads, I feel like I'm being a bit deep, but God bless it again. This reminds me of my mum. This one, it does actually nearly bring me to tears. So I'm doing actually well listening to this one, lads. But she always loved this and always had it on all the mix CDs and made. No, you make your own mix CDs, Liam, and I always made the sum. And this was always one of her staples. So got a lot of time for this song. A lot of time for Reg in general. Great artist.
This is one of the, from having Sky, I remember this being on Sky on their music shows very, very regularly. And that Healing Hand song, which is double A side, I don't think I've ever heard. This is, this is a massive song, and obviously Dua Lipa did it recently.
Vicky said it's one of her favourite songs of all time.
Oh,
wow. When I played it to her, she was just like, oh no, this is great. And she knew all the words to it straight away. And it was like, whereas I had actually needed to rely on the subtitles. I was like, oh, right. He's not saying Cocoa Pops. It's Cold, Cold Heart.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
I think it's easy to be dismissive of Elton John, isn't it?
It is.
Like, he's very much like, I think, I'm trying to think.
Princess Diana Reg, I haven't got a lot of time for. Like Rockin' Reg, loads of time.
That's what I mean. 70s, and but maybe this is like as this, and then I think after this is the Don't Let the Sun with George Michael, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then he becomes too big again, doesn't he? With the Diana stuff, JP, and then he's kind of not cashing in. I wouldn't say that, but afterwards it's like, oh, it's Elton John, and everything's guaranteed a hit. He had to work his way back up because he was 80s for all intents and purposes. A few years he hadn't had nothing, had he? So. Yeah, a lot of time for this, though. A lot of time.
Yeah, as you say, just that ability to reinvent yourself. Just for anybody in the public eye, in entertainment, be it film, be it TVs, whatever, to be able to reinvent yourself so regularly over so many eras as well, deserves a bit of kudos in terms of like, I'm sure there's people 16, 17 who are aware of who Elton John is in this day and age based on like duets he's done. I mean, he had a show on ITV, didn't he? He had like an audience with Elton John about 2 months ago, apparently. So, it's, he is like one of those constants in like British music, isn't he? And I think everybody at some degree, maybe not love it, maybe not really like it, but they have a song of Elton John's like, I like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's hard for somebody with such a big body of work, for someone to say they dislike
to not say it all, dismiss it
yeah.
all, of course.
Yeah. But before we get on to number 4, Matty's main event, I just want to mention number 10. I think I'm revealing a lot about myself tonight with ballads and love songs, but Hold On by Wilson Phillips. I absolutely love this song. I absolutely love this song. And I mean, I don't want to be IWC here, but I loved it before Bridesmaids. You know what I mean? Before everybody else jumped on board.
But I believe you there, Liam. I believe that's true.
I think this is a proper, like, radio-friendly 90s American vocal pop song. That's just like, we're talking about smooth magic. It is very much in that era of, like, you know, this music sort of thing. Absolutely love this.
Well, Liam, when are we starting our ballad podcast, mate? Because I'm in.
Well, because I'm with friends and I've openly revealed some of these songs. Like, this is really in my after a few drinks. This is in my karaoke repertoire. This song is.
Okay.
It's in the top 3. This is.
We've got our night out coming up, Liam. I'm gonna hold you to that.
If we were pissed up and this came on and people were singing, I'd happily join in. For something like this. Absolutely, like, perfectly fine ballad. My God, we've had on this show some top 10s who've just gone, oh my God, that's horrible. And they tend to be the ones that are more modern for this.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, the older back we go, the more you go, okay, and you change your mind on stuff like this. Again, you know, 11-year-old JP wouldn't have been mad about this. He wouldn't have been a big Wilson Phillips guy because he would have just wanted to be snarky about it. But, like, you separate yourself away from that kind of level of snark and you go, actually, this is a perfectly good tune. Like, it really is. Again, it's staples of your magic, your heart, Smooth FM, works perfectly.
But before, got to mention it because it ties in with the overall, like, arc of this show. We've got to mention number 2, maybe just the group. As, like, America, you know, as a culture, they might not last long, but Jesus Christ, even I remember them. My sister, who would have been like 16, 17 at this time, absolutely going berserk for New Kids on the Block. Like, these were a phenomenon, weren't they, Liam? These were genuinely a phenomenon, mate. Genuinely, like, one of the you know,
original boy band.
Boy band.
I was going to say, as big as they are as an act by themselves, I think their legacy is what they had come after them in terms of Take That, Your Boyzone. That all stems from
NSYNC.
Band of this, a contemporary
Boys,
a contemporary vocal band that could appeal to the younger crowd, the older crowd, and, you know what I mean, dominate the charts. There was a 18-month period, 2-year period where
the right stuff. What a tune.
Everything they put out was a top 10 hit sort of thing. And yeah, it's these are the originals for me, like before we Take That and whatnot, E17. These are the catalysts. You can imagine, like, you know, you can imagine a Pete Waterman seeing them and going, right, I know where I'm making my money, sort of thing. It is very much like a finely tuned machine, and it ticks them box. You know, those American heartthrobs, they've got a good voice, but, you know, they're all good looking guys, but they all have a glint in their eye. You know, it's all very much a format that's been tried and tested, and afterwards so much came after them.
And just to see Donnie Wahlberg, though, who the new JP, that he'd be the first 2 Saw movies, I guess.
Know. That's 2. I'm sure he's in about 4 or 5 of the fucking, isn't he? He's like...
But also, last thing on them, Jordan Knight, Liam. He was always the best voice in them, and I love his songs. You remember "Give It to You"? He brought it out in the year 2000. Fucking love that song.
I know that give it to you.
Yeah,
it's got that little drum and bass bit in the middle. Cracking song.
Quality, love it.
Cracking song.
But anyway, go on. Yes. We ended on the main event.
We are going to end on the main event here for the singles chart. Number 4, "Killer" by Adamski. This version, at times, and often more so than not, credited towards Seal. Seal does the vocals on this, and then a couple of months afterwards, Seal re-records it with Trevor Horn, a noted producer and of the Buggles, and completely re-records the song to go into his self-titled album Seal, and then that's re-released, and then that's Killer by Seal, whereas this is Killer by Adamski. Hope everybody's keeping track.
Yes.
This
is unbelievable. Like, what a song, though. Genuinely, like, even if you're not a fan of the artist in general or whoever, like, you just can't deny it, can you? This is an unbelievable song. Like, genuinely, so good.
Absolutely, to the point where there's actually, one of the links we had for the Italia 90 review, the entire soundtrack is basically this.
Yeah.
Like, because it would have been
instrumental, isn't it? Yeah.
The instrumental of it. And like Seal himself, who I think now he does, like, what is it? It's not America's Got Talent. Is it America's Got Talent? He does.
He does something along those lines. Yeah,
he does one of those. Might be The Voice, but he's like a massive deal, like between that, like Kiss Like a Rose.
I've seen him live. Seal. He supported Duran about like 10 years ago in the Echo Arena in Liverpool. He was unbelievable. He got everyone going, like, for the support act, a big name. Like, I was like, whoa, didn't know till the night. It was Seal. I've made up. I've heard Kiss from a Rose live, lads. It's a fucking unbelievable.
I was going to say, if we're going to have this ballad loving that we're all having tonight, I mean, Gareth can't come back quick enough, can he? Based on what
here we go. What's going on here? Get the grudge back.
This wouldn't be allowed on his watch, would it? But yeah, no. Kiss from a Rose for me, the Seal song. But this is iconic. And again, you know, on the subject of time as well, 1990, and it still sounds fresh now.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
You put this on in a club now, Liam, everyone will still go for it, and everyone will say, "What's this?" Like, but I love this as well. I love this. I got the goosebumps. I love asking my brother this because my brother would have been like going out around this time, and I just imagine like hearing this at the time in a nightclub. I'm just loving it when it come out. Like, I always go back to songs like this thinking, what a time it must have been. Boss.
Well, and to think the first time you would hear these songs are in nightclubs, you know.
Yeah.
The DJs getting like imports and white labels and, you know, stuff not readily played on the radio or on, you know, music television hadn't really made its way to this country outside of like a Top of the Pops episode, a chart show episode here and there. So like, you know, these songs would appear in clubs, you know, like almost even 6 months before they had a general release. So, you know, as you were saying earlier about movies and stuff when we were talking about BBC, the hype was built up that this was coming out and was being played on the radio and stuff along those lines. But yeah, again, another great song. I think we might be back on track of doing a good chart this year.
Yes,
based on a few duds we've had over recent months. But just to finish, a couple of notable albums. A couple of notable albums were released in June 1990. James released Gold Mother. Entombed released Left Hand Path. Teenage Fan Club, Catholic Education, Goo by Sonic Youth, and Danzig 2, Lucifer by Danzig. Matty, anything in there that you're a fan of? I know you're a Danzig fan, so
yes,
we're going to go there.
And we're going to go there straight away, Liam. Made up like
I'm Danzig fan, mate.
Just if you can, I know it might be there, but Blood and Tears, Liam. If we're sticking ballad, what a like, that's one of my favorite songs, like, ever. I think it's on every list I do now on Spotify. Like, love that song so much. Like, I obviously only got into Danzig. It wasn't that long ago, really, and didn't know his backstory. You know, I didn't know nothing about him. It was a song. I think it was might have been that song I heard first, and then just done a diving, like even the Misfits and all that. Like, it's just I didn't know all of that. Like, I love like discovering stuff like that in itself. But yeah, just this album's great. I'm more of a Danzig. Would surprise you that I'm a Danzig free guy as well. So,
I think the first four Danzig records. I mean, I think everybody has a favorite one. Did you say your favorite was Danzig 3?
Probably 3 if I had to pick. Blood and Tears is probably my favorite song, though, Liam.
I would agree.
Favorite song.
And you saying about discovering Danzig, I'm not surprised by that because I know how big a fan of the Doors you are, and he's very much.
Mate,
it's
scary.
You know what I mean?
It's very scary, especially on that Blood and Tears. That's what it is. It's just Morrison. You can just hear it. But he did idolize him, didn't he, as well? So it's basing himself on them as well. But yeah, brilliant stuff. He's
first 4 albums. I mean, some of the tracks on this. I mean, like Killer Wolf.
Oh, Gale. I love Gale, Liam.
Tired of Being Alive. You know, Blood and Tears
Yeah.
as well. Long Way Back from Hell. It's a great album. I mean, as much as he becomes a bit of a meme,
he does.
He's still got the tunes. You know what I mean? I won't hear it if he badly does it. JP, anything jump out to you off the list? Sonic Youth, Goo. I know.
Yeah.
If Gareth
was here, he on this.
Yeah. Primarily, I was going to say Goo. Primarily cool thing. I think it was just like an incredible fucking tune. Like for that as well, and it's an iconic album cover. Like I think it's one that's like, you know, in terms of the illustration they've got on the front of there as well. But yeah, I mean, Gareth was much more into his grunge than I was at that point in time. I had always liked James. It wouldn't be so much Goldmother. It probably would be the next album. 7 would be the one for me, because I love Born of Frustration. But I love Come Down as well, because that kind of Curtains era, Curtains haircut. That's what it would have been going into there. So they're the ones that very much like kind of stick out for me. I mean, if Gareth was here, he'd be like, Teenage Fan Club. Why aren't you fucking talking about Teenage Fan Club?
I'll jump in about Teenage Fan Club. One of my favourite bands. I once saw Teenage Fan Club play something like 79 songs over 3 nights.
Jesus Christ.
I've never bought a season ticket to see a band before, but I had to go and see them. They played their first 2 albums in entirety the first night. Then the next 2, the second night, the third night, they played the 5th album and like rarities and B-sides. So yeah, I don't really think I need to see Teenage Fan Club. I'm never in a position when I go, I wish Teenage Fan Club would play that one song live that I like. They've pretty much played everything I want to hear from them live now. So I think, having a season ticket for the band, maybe where concerts go in the future. But yeah, just to mention on a couple of the other albums that I mentioned, Entombed, death metal band. Probably not as abrasive a sound as you can imagine. They are heavy, but there's an underlining element of groove and melody to what they do, which is probably not necessarily, to people not used to the music, obvious on first listen, but it's definitely there. First 3 albums of theirs are held up as some of the greatest in the genre. This was I think this is the 2nd album in that line. Anybody with an interest in heavy music and want to hear something different, who have never heard Entombed, they're very much one of those bands that have appealed and have influenced possibly your favourite band, because
I'll give them a go, Liam.
Their sound is very, very influential, and at the time, their mix of heavy music with almost like rock and roll riffs, they kind of coined the phrase death and roll on later albums, which was mixed death metal and rock and roll. This isn't really lending itself to that sound, but there are elements to it. And if somebody wants to check something out musically that we've mentioned, that may be a little different, I will say check out Left Hand Path by Entombed. So with that being said, I think that completes music for this month, and that completes all 4 pillars of time. So I'm going to throw that back to JP. JP,
thank you very much.
That was
Excellent.
June 1990.
It was June 1990, and what a hell of a time it was. Another excellent show, lads. Absolutely love.
I'm not just saying it; it's my favourite show to record. That I know it's for time. You know, it's every 3 months we do it, but love it. And Liam, thanks again. Every list you seem to just pick stuff out and do your research unbelievably, mate. Absolutely.
I'm intrigued to know where we go next. Where we take for this as well, and I'll probably, this is the point where I'll I don't know if you've got any thoughts for that. I'm sure you do.
I will freely say, any patrons out there, if they've got a particular year that they want to hear covered, or a particular period of an upcoming month that they feel may be in our wheelhouse in terms of subject matter, leave a comment to the thread regarding this episode, and by all means, we can freely look into what we can do.
And if you want Discord, wherever you want to leave the comments, that's a good shout. That's a very.
And if you want to watch And if you are watching this on the YouTube, and inevitably you've seen a series of still images where videos were because of the myriad of copyright strikes that come up, just go to the Patreon, patreon.com/grapple, where there will be up on there, and it's publicly available, the unedited version of this, so you'll be able to watch this at your leisure as well, as long as you can, as long as you subscribe to it and like and subscribe to this.
And in the nicest way as well, we've missed Gareth, so we'll get him back on here.
We have.
On the yeah, we've missed him. Liam, thanks for doing double duty as well, mate. Bookending the show, of course. But Gareth should be back in 3 months' time if he remembers that he's on this
double
time.
duty, I might add.
Well,
King of the big stuff.
double duty, double fee, Matt, because
Yeah.
I'll raise it. I'll raise my invoice and send it your way shortly, mate.
Of course, mate. Yeah, of course.
And that leaves, at the end of all of that, all I have to say is, bye.
Ta-da.
See ya.